The House Committee on Elections will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Shaheen.
Here.
Vice Chair Busey. Representative Isaac. Here. Representative Morales-Shaw. Representative Plesa. Representative Raymond.
Here.
Representative Swanson. Representative Toth.
Here.
Representative Terry Wilson.
Here. And let the record show Ms. Swanson present and a visitor.
This is Ava.
Hello, Ava. Okay, a quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone wishing to testify before the committee, please register at the kiosks located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require any assistance, please feel free to reach out to committee staff. Due to the number of witnesses who have registered and to accommodate all who wish to testify, there will be a time limit of 3 minutes per witness during public testimony. Members, please remember to check out the publicly available comments. These comments are left by the public on each agenda item in our hearings. Comments are open until the end of our hearing and are posted upon adjournment. Members, we're going to now vote out two bills which we have heard previously. May the record show that Vice Chair Busey is present. And we're going to vote out two Senate bills. So the chair lays out SB 688 by Hughes, companion to HB 2811 by Hayes. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the date of the meeting of presidential electors of this state. The chair moves that SB 688 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it does pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Shaheen.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Yes.
Representative Isaac. Aye. Representative Morales-Shaw. Representative Plesa. Aye. Representative Raymond.
Aye.
Representative Swanson.
Aye.
Representative Toth.
Aye.
Representative Terry Wilson.
Aye. There being 8 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, the motion prevails. Chair lays out SB 914 by Blanco. It's the companion to House Bill 1638 by Morales of Maverick. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to authorizing certain cities to change the date on which the general election for officers is held. The chair moves that SB 914 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it does pass to be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Shaheen.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Representative Isaac. Aye. Representative Morales-Shaw. Representative Plesa. Aye. Representative Raymond.
Aye.
Representative Swanson.
Aye.
Representative Toth.
Aye.
Representative Terry Wilson.
There being 8 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, the motion prevails. All right, members, give me one moment. We are going to hear bills. Chair lays out House Bill 3909 and recognizes Representative Hicklin to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Shaheen, members of the committee, for giving me the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3909. Current Texas law states that a person may not use a wireless communication device within 100 feet of a voting station. At many polling locations, this means that a person isn't allowed to use a wireless phone even while outside of the building waiting in line. In some locations, the parking lot is within 100 feet of the voting station. In other voting locations, such as college campuses or within community buildings, many people may be passing by or sitting within 100 feet of the polling station, even if they are not in line to vote. The prohibition on phone use outside of the voting station is unnecessary and proves difficult and time-consuming for election workers to enforce. HB 3909 amends the election code by removing the current 100-foot boundary for use of a wireless device and instead requires that a person may not use a wireless communication device inside a voting station. According to the election code, voting station is defined as the voting booth or other place where voters mark their ballots or otherwise indicate their votes at a polling place. I expect a committee substitute changing the language to require that a wireless device may not be used within a room in which voting is taking place. This language came to me by the Texas Association of Counties in collaboration with the Texas Association of County Election Officials. So the substitute will include the language that they suggested, which specifically is the room. The committee substitute will require that the Secretary of State shall prescribe a notice to be placed on the door of the room where voting is taking place. This will allow...
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Point of order. She's referring to committee substitute.
Okay.
I don't see there's one in front of us, so
Yeah, just make sure we're okay, that as long as we
Okay.
address the bill that's in front of the committee.
Okay.
You can talk about some changes that you're going to make.
Sure.
And there's a committee substitute in process.
I think
but we're
that,
trying
Chairman,
to protect her.
parliamentary inquiry,
Yeah.
I think that is a, that is, she can be removed from office for having done that. And,
You have to show me that in the code.
Within 24 hours.
Okay, great. Look,
But
I
we're
just
gonna
want to let
focus
you
on
know
the
that
bill,
there, if you look at the bill itself, it literally is crossing through 3 words. And as of this morning, we have become aware of some changes that would be helpful, and those are the changes that we're happy to make to specify room, and then the other change will be that the Secretary of State will provide us a sign that we'll put on the door, letting people know, and also letting them know that if they're required for some kind of disability, that they're allowed to use. They qualify for an exception. So that's what I have. Thank you so much for your time to consider, and I am happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, reserve my right to close.
Thank you, Representative. Ms. Plesa?
So I know that when people are voting inside the polling location, the administrators and those working are very cautious about folks not using their phone, like to photograph their ballots and things like that. Your bill isn't going to change any of that, is it?
No, not at all. This is just, the 100-foot.
Oh,
It's a
I know.
lot, and you can be waiting in line. Right, we work those lines.
Yeah.
So that is a lot of time that you can be sitting there, depending on how many propositions are on the ballot. And so to ask people in this day and age to not be on their cell phone, they might also be reviewing the ballot, familiarizing
phone,
That's
right?
right. And so this is like within that zone, it's okay. But once you get into the room where voting is taking
Then
place,
They're like,
then
please put your phones
that's
away.
right.
And, things
And
like
I think this clarification will also provide simplicity and will help these election judges clarify. There will be a sign so they can just point to it, say that this is the election code.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes,
Thank you,
Good
Representative.
question.
Chairman.
Mr. Raymond?
Yeah, all kidding aside, this is interesting, and I'm sure we got to try to do it right. And I don't know if the Secretary of State's working with you on language, but I'm thinking now, and I don't know if this happens with you all, but I guess going back 2 or 3 elections by now, I will get people, who support me, like me, whatever, and they'll send me a picture because you vote on the screen, right? Yeah, there's a libertarian over there. Way to go, baby! Yeah, and they'll take a picture of they vote for me, right? And they take a picture of it, and they're like, "Hey, I voted for you." So I'm like,
And then they change their vote.
I wondered. Well, I've wondered about that. I've wondered about that too. But no, seriously, I don't know if when I first few times I got it, kind of made me feel a little uneasy, right? Because I'm like, well, they're in there. But so I'm glad you're doing this because it brings some important attention to it, and so maybe you can help us figure out, kind of what that looks like. And so, Chairman, have you experienced that? Has anybody ever done that? Like, will they vote for you and they'll take a picture of the screen and send it to you and say, "Hey, I voted for you"?
I've had people take a picture of the screen and post it on social media.
Okay. Well, you know what I'm talking about. And so I wonder if under current law, they really weren't supposed to be doing that,
No, they definitely were not supposed to be
They
doing
weren't?
that. And so this,
Contraband on your
No, I deleted all those because I figured there might be some issue. And, but no, so again, I'm glad you brought some attention to it, and maybe with the committee sub, you can, I don't know, just try to make it better.
Yeah,
But I agree with you.
Thank
that
you.
100 feet away is too
Thank you.
much.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Hicklin will recognize your right to close.
I appreciate
And we'll
that.
go into
Thank you.
testimony. Chair calls Kathleen Hagler, representing herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Kathy Hagler. You're here representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
well, welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm sorry, but I just cannot support this bill. It's very simple as it's written right now without a substitute. It just removes three little words, 100 feet of, but it basically would turn the voting place on its head. Instead of not using wireless communication device within 100 feet of a voting station, and when we're talking about the station, we're talking about that little cubicle where you're voting. We're not talking about the whole room. Well, now we could have people talking on cell phones while they're in line, waiting to be checked in at the qualification desk. They would be disturbing other voters. People could be talking loudly on their phones about who they're voting for. Yes, we're voting for John Smith for that race on their phones, and that would be electioneering. That's what we call it, because they wouldn't be in a voting station. And the one that really concerns me is this is already happening too much. But we would have election workers who could be texting and playing video games and making phone calls instead of doing the work that they're assigned to do. So my point, I guess, is that we already have a law about a 100-foot distance marker outside the door of the voting place. So I don't understand why we are not happy with saying you can't have it within 100 feet, a device within 100 feet of the voting station. And I realize that the biggest problem we have with that is people want to look at their cell phone to look at their voter guide, that someone sent them an email or something, but this still won't fix that because you couldn't have it in the voting station, so that wouldn't help them. And of course, we already have signs that are posted on the walls or posted somewhere about not being able to have a wireless device. So this would be changing that up. And you know how everybody pays a lot of attention to all 5,000 of those signs that are posted on the wall. So I did want to answer your question, Rep. Raymond. So this section of the code addresses 61014A, which is specifically about a voting station. Excuse me, but there are other sections of that code that address recording devices and photos. This doesn't even touch those. So those rules would still be in place about not taking photos or recording. This would not address that. And that's all I have.
Members, any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Swanson?
Yes, thank you for coming, Ms. Hagler. Is there anything that you could be agreeable to? It sounded like that the author had experienced something where she was in line, she was past the 100-foot marker, waiting to vote, and the line wasn't moving well, and so she couldn't really, it was a long time without the phone,
Yes, ma'am.
especially these days, we're all so addicted.
I understand.
Okay, so but maybe your child calls you and is like, hey, I missed the bus, and you need to take it. What could she do? She's doing a committee sub anyway. Is there something she could do that you would be agreeable to, like 100 feet and within the building or something? Because it seems like if you were outside.
Right. I still
then-
like that 100-foot distance marker outside the door of the building. Once you get there, I think that's as far as it needs to go. If 100-foot away from the voting station is closer to the parking lot than that 100-foot distance marker, I'm not figuring out how that happened. But I think I like the law just like it is, so that once you get to that 100-foot distance marker, you shouldn't be using phones. Anywhere in line for, anywhere in the room, anywhere in there, because you can be electioneering if you're on a phone.
Okay, so you're thinking even if they were outside in this line that's moving slowly, they're on the phone telling somebody how they're voting, or somebody's telling them and they're repeating it out loud.
That's my concern.
Okay, so you can't think of anything she could put in her sub that you would be happy with?
Right, I think they mentioned that it would still be in the room, but you know how sometimes, like in a voting place, there's people lined up in your room, but they also go down the hall and down the next hall if you're like early voting. And so I still would want it to be all within that sacred place inside the 100-foot distance marker. So I'm not seeing a way to make work what she wants to work and still keep the sanctity of no electioneering in that area, because I just think it would be too easy to influence other voters and distract other voters.
So what do you do with the buildings that have more than one thing going on? Like where I stood most of the time, in fact, most of the places I've had either held elections or I've been electioneering, you go inside and the community college is open and the students are in there. So is there something in the law that protects those kids from breaking the law? Is the librarian across the hall from the voting center?
That's a great
Is she breaking the law?
And maybe there could be some clarifying language, perhaps, that it would be people that are in line to vote, registering to vote, in the process of voting, scanning, or leaving the voting place, just those people, rather than passersby or people who work in the building. Maybe there's some clarifying language.
That part
room for
does
that.
seem like it would be, I think what we do
Intent.
is we just know what they mean and nobody ever gets in trouble, but you're right, they could.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Isaac?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I read the 100 feet and wireless communication device, you automatically believe that this was law because people might electioneer within the 100 feet. But when I read it, I thought, I wonder if this is to protect our machines from a wireless device connecting to the machines. So do you know the original intent? Was it, I mean, what?
No, ma'am, I don't know the original intent, but I will say I have a lot of confidence in the way we certify our machines and what SOS requires. And personally, I don't think that they're hackable with cell phones. So that was not one of my concerns, was any kind of security. It was mainly about electioneering and also allowing the election workers to be doing things that they should be doing.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Chair calls Dr. Laura Presley with True Texas Elections. Welcome, ma'am. I show you registered as Dr. Laura Presley. You're with True Texas Elections, and you're here to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. You may
Chair.
proceed.
Representative Isaac, you are exactly on. If you look at the specifications for Bluetooth devices, their radius of operation is 100 feet. So I am very much against this bill. This bill would now allow Bluetooth devices to be within that 100 feet, and yes, they could hack the poll books, they could hack the MiFi, they could hack the modems. This 100-foot is a protective barrier. Technically, there's a technical reason for it. And you can talk to Phil Waldron about this, and he'll agree. But there's a technical reason for this. And yes, Representative Swanson, when it's in a location, a library that has, another room next door, that is a vector for attack. I have no understanding of why we put voting locations that within that 100-foot, someone could come in with a Bluetooth device or a computer and hack into the system. It's beyond reason why we allow this. We should never allow this. And with all due respect to the county election administrators, I would expect them to know technically what the Bluetooth reach is, and they would never put this up so that our systems could be protected. So I'm vehemently against this. There's a technical reason for that 100-foot, and yes, Representative Isaac, that is exactly the reason. And I'm here if there's any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Oh, Ms. Swanson.
Thank you. Okay, so since the law requires, in Texas, requires that the machines are not capable of being connected to the internet, what exactly do you foresee
Great question.
happening?
Well, the poll books are connected to the internet.
That's true.
There's a MiFi in there, there's a modem. All of that's connected to the internet. And that is, you know, you can talk to various people around the country and they'll say, well, the voting systems, the DS200, the ballot marking device, and there's a lot of debate on are those hackable, okay? And let's table that. But the poll books, totally
Right, they're
Wi-Fi.
made to hook
That's
up,
it.
right.
And so you could find out who's voted. You could even falsify who's voting. You could change it. You could do all kinds of stuff. Get access to the voter
Add extra
rolls.
names or something
That's why
perhaps.
this 100-foot is there technically, 100 feet. And I wish we would never allow polling locations where there would be a 100-foot radius of anything, a grocery store, library. That 100-foot is sacred. Technically, there's a reason for that. And I know people may be naive and not understand the technical details of that, but you go look up any Bluetooth wireless device on the internet and yes, look at the radius, it's 100 foot.
I guess we're waiting for proof that it's happened the first time, and then we'll fix the problem.
Well, we have some proof. We can debate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Bless y'all. Thank you.
Chair calls Jeff Howard, representing himself. Welcome, sir. I show you registered as Jeff Howard. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
That's correct,
All
Chairman.
right, well, thank you, and you may proceed.
Chairman Sheen, members of the committee, thank you for your time. I'm here to speak in support of HB 3909. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm also the vice chair of the Bell County Republican Party. I'm the party elections administrator, an election judge, and I lead a bipartisan training team for the Bell County Elections Administration Office, where we train all the election clerks and judges, both Democrats and Republicans, for our elections. This issue during our training is always a major topic of discussion. Current Texas Election Code 61.014 has not been updated since 2007, and technology and people's use and dependency on cell phones has increased exponentially since then. I don't believe the legislation has really kept up with the technology. Our judges understand that they have the authority to enforce the 100-foot exclusion zone, but they have the discretion to allow the cell phones to be operated within that 100-foot zone while the folks are standing in lines. This kind of leads to different standards across the county and across the state. You know, it's 2025. Really can't expect voters waiting up to 2 hours in line not to have access to their family. Spoken to emergencies a little while ago. To the businesses that they have to conduct while they're standing in line, or even just to entertain themselves or their kids while they're standing in line. Enforcement of this also takes resources away from the election site. You have to put one or two of your election clerks out there trooping the line, and that causes confrontation with voters sometimes. I've seen the confrontations. I've been involved in those confrontations. You have to pull the law out, have to have it with you, and it's not a good thing. So it takes away resources, the resources that we don't have to do this. Resources are better spent inside the polling site and enforcing those rules inside the polling site. This bill right here would bring the code up to speed with the realities of what's actually happening on the ground. So for these reasons, I would urge the committee to vote yes on the bill.
Thank you, sir, very much. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Jennifer Doinoff with the Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself. Hello, ma'am. Hi. I show you registered as Jennifer Doinoff. You're here representing the Texas Association of, don't worry, your time's not out. Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for being
And good
here.
afternoon. So there is no enforcement of this law right now, and it is completely inconsistent in every polling location as to how these things are handled. And so when we saw this bill, we thought we would provide some language that hopefully would at least, at the very minimum, add some consistency to this cell phone issue that I think in reality, a lot of counties deal with in the polling location, just as the witness just said. It can be the most contentious thing we do in an election is telling somebody to put their cell phone away. And so, and different judges do use different judgment when they do it, and there are other people in the building, because I don't know of any polling location that isn't in a building that already has Wi-Fi and things that are going on. And I don't know where we would poll if we didn't have those locations. So we offered language that we thought actually would help the bill, because that's what we're trying to do. And that language would put a sign on the door. The electioneering is already in law, and there is something to enforce that. So I think the signage should include that. But we think this is something that would help the bill and would give some definition to it. And also we did, and I didn't hear in the if any the changes would be impacted, but 61.014B is the section of the code that talks about recording images and sound within the room. So we did ask for that to be added as well.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Members, any questions? Ms. Isaac?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So will you be a little more clear? When you say a sign on the door, you're talking about just not having cell phones in the actual building, but will be allowed within the 100 feet,
Yes, within the 100 feet.
but not within the building, is what you're saying?
Not within the room where voting is taking place. And so the changes that the representative talked about were a sign prescribed by the state, and that sign probably should include language about electioneering.
Okay, so you're not even saying building, you're just saying the room within where the poll is
Yes.
actually taking place.
And the bill that we're testifying on is voting stations, so that's right up to the point where you're voting. So the language we're offering is not within the room for where voting is taking place.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, so much for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Ken Moore, representing himself. Our students are leaving. Welcome to the Capitol.
I told them they wouldn't get called on it. They came down.
Was something I said?
Hello, sir. I show you registered as Ken Moore. You're here representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill.
That is correct.
Okay, well, welcome.
In the early days of elections, it was common to have the equivalent of a caucus. You'd have everybody in the room who supports person A stand over there. Everyone who supports person B would stand over here. And it's worked pretty well as long as you had reasonable people running as candidates. In a race when all the candidates are honorable, this worked okay, but politics, by its very nature, distributes power and money.
All right.
Thus, it was inevitable that men of greed and ambition would work to sway the electorate one way or the other. Some who voted against the men of power lost their jobs. Others suffered injuries from mysterious accidents. Others still just disappeared. And it became evident that a person's vote needed to be between the voter and their God, and no one else. This led to a number of reforms to protect the secrecy of the ballot. Among these was a prohibition against cameras and other recording devices inside the polling place. Now, this bill, as is written, would allow someone to use a recording device at the very door of the polling place. And this threatens the secrecy of the ballot and defeats the efforts to guard the integrity of the election.
Thank you, sir, very much. Members, any questions? Ms. Swanson?
Yes. Now, I definitely agree with you that as originally written about the voting station, like somebody would be legal leaning over your shoulder taking a picture of your ballot. But if there is a substitute coming that says you can't do it in the room where the voting is taking place, would you be happy with that, or do you think that's still a problem?
You know, I've thought about that question, and that's a very good question. I've heard of places where you have the walls to the building are glass, and you can see inside the building just from there. It would have to be some you've got people addressing this from very different angles, okay? All I'm addressing is from the standpoint of what can you see, what can you record. If you could somehow arrange, I don't know, maybe a second marker somewhere, said you can use a cell phone up to this point, but no further. Maybe something like that would work.
Interesting stuff there. Okay. Yeah, I do know that, like in my county, we have Hart InterCivic, and when they went to the newer ones that, print out the paper and then you go feed it in something, my one big complaint with them is that the privacy things are like about, this big, and there's just no privacy. Oh, plus, on the old machines, the ballot was down horizontal, so nobody could see it. But now it's on the screen sticking straight up, and you've got these little tiny flimsy things, like there's no privacy on the screen anymore. So that is one of my complaints with those. I don't know, I've never voted on ES&S machines, but hadn't thought about somebody looking in through a window. So anyway, thank you for thinking it out.
We have the same equipment in Brazoria County that you have.
Okay.
And I've run the same situation. We've had some people who are manning the scanner insisting that people turn their ballot upside down to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
I think they don't really have the authority to push that. And I think it's up to the individual. If you don't care how people see your vote, that, then you don't care. But I can see what you're talking about, and I think there should be some thought put in that direction.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir, for being here. Chair calls Andrew Eller with SREC E-Committee and Secure Texas Elections. Hello, Mr. Eller.
Hello.
So a couple things. One is I show you registered twice, so would you mind?
That's a mistake. You can remove one of those.
There's a penalty when you register twice, so I just want to let you know.
So that's okay. I'll pay the penalty.
And then did I, just teasing by the way, am I saying your organization that you're representing accurately? It's showing here SREC E-Committee and Secure Texas Elections.
That's correct. Yes, I shortened it for you after the last couple of times. So State Republican Executive Committee, Election Integrity, and Secure Texas Elections.
All right, so let me make sure that I have that. So it's the SREC, you want to be referred to as E-Committee?
Yeah, that's fine, yes.
Okay, and Secure Texas Elections.
Yes.
LP Subcommittee.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Again, we welcome acronyms, but this is good. And you're representing yourself.
Yeah, I'm representing them and myself.
Yes,
That's correct.
okay. All right,
So I'm
thank you,
representing
sir, for being patient with us, and you make it proceed.
Okay, yes, and we are against the bill. The main issue is the bill as it's written clearly would allow cell phone use next to a voting station. I mean, just exactly what was brought up. I will say ditto to that you can overlook somebody. You also cannot totally, I guess, police the area to make sure that folks are not surreptitiously recording or taking video. I've been a poll site judge for over 30 years, most recently the last 4 years, been in Central Count. But I did have problems with people trying to bring in cell phones, trying to take videos, those kind of things. And even though Section B of 61.014 deals with that, I understand the committee sub may change that and allow that, allow that within the 100-foot, just like Section A is allowing that within the 100-foot close to the voting station. So that brings up the next point I'd like to make is there's a huge misnomer. Section 61.014 deals with the use of wireless devices within 100 foot of the voting station. A lot of people think it's within the electioneering zone, which is 100 foot of the door. And that's 61.003 for election day and 85.036 for early voting. And so sometimes people get those confused. So typically, what we're talking about here is the 100 foot of the voting station. So most of the time, that's the door of the location, and hearing the layout of a potential committee sub, actually seeing some of the language of a potential committee sub. In fact, my committee has actually looked at this, and we felt like maybe if that happens, then we would be okay with that, and that would be something we would like to see done, is a substitute where you just say the room or the door to the building, something like that. That would be extremely helpful. But for now, we are against the bill as it is written because it would allow the usage of the cell phone right up to the voting station, and that could cause a major problem.
Okay. Members, any questions? Ms. Swanson?
I'm wondering if perhaps we need to say within so many feet before you even get to that door, so nobody's like peering in the door and there's a whole line of machines, so, you know, maybe 10 feet outside that door.
And we did actually discuss that a little bit, and we actually had some language that said, and in sight of a voting station. So if you could actually see the voting station.
Oh, okay.
You could not you could not use your cell phone because somebody could be taking pictures. So if you're outside the glass area that one of the previous witnesses talked about, these glass areas.
Right.
Well, you can see the voting station, so if you can see the voting station, it's not allowed within that site.
Okay, but we would make it, you would keep it where if they're beyond a certain distance outside there, like.
Correct.
Because you
Yeah,
might be 500 feet and still be able to make it. Yeah, I can see a machine
And, you know,
in there.
and I like Dr. Presley's comment about, you know, the Bluetooth, the 100-foot, that clearly is, if you keep it at the 100-foot, that would be a distance, but, you know, if you made it sooner than that, you'd still need to say if you could see the voting station or the door to the building or the door to the
Okay,
room.
okay.
There has to be some type of compromise that would make this entire piece work so that folks could at least still use it in line inside the electioneering 100-foot mark, but not not actually in the room and create those problems in the room.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your input.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, against House Bill? You want, okay, do you want to come up and register?
Yeah, I registered, but I just want to change from not testify to
Okay. Is that her? So, ma'am, I show you registered as Susanna Carranza, Dr. Susanna Carranza, and you're here representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill?
Yes.
Okay, well, you may proceed. Thank you.
Yes. As I mentioned in previous hearings, I am usually a judge, election judge, or early day clerk, or deputy, and there's pretty much no place on earth that you can hold an election that you're not going to have cell phones around us. And as many previous witnesses mentioned, it's one of the most stressful thing and time-consuming thing to have to tell people waiting in line for 2, 3, 4 hours that, because sometimes it takes, when you get that close, sometimes it's not problematic, but then there's people around them using their cell phones. And it's like, what is the difference if you're on this side of the line or not? And it's just like, it's not realistic, and it doesn't make any sense if a person is just using their phone. I can see the electioneering language still exists. The recording language still exists. It's just the use. So as long as we enforce the rules about electioneering, and then maybe there can be clarification that electioneering, including talking loud in your phone while in line or something like that, it's really, you're just peacefully looking at your phone, and you're less likely to be a disruptive voter, because I actually personally encounter a situation that one of my poll workers was almost threatened by a voter because she told him that his girlfriend could not use the phone. And then I had to be with the call center for a good 20 minutes live talking to the voter because he was making a case, and I didn't want to escalate anymore. So it cost me a good, huge amount of time that I should be doing something else. So it is an outdated law. It makes a lot of sense to keep the part of recording and things like that, because that's not the part that was stricken. And if there's like little things that need to be fixed, I think the election administrators would be the best ones to decide from the practicality. But at the end of the day, using a cell phone actually keeps peace, and it's nonsense to say that people can hack into the election systems. If it's just like the machines, the only thing they have is the e-poll books that have the voter rolls, and they are monitoring remotely all the time. So if there's any issues, they would know, and they have many ways, like tech folks, to sort that out. So it's like you enforce the security of the system, not try to block the universe.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3909? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Hicklin to close on the bill.
Thank you. Chairman, members, thank you again so much for your thoughtful questions and taking the time after our long marathon of the last 48 hours to give attention to this bill. The intention is just to bring clarity and hopefully order to our voting locations for the sake of our judges, and also clarity for those that are voting. I think as the previous testimony is, if we can hack into our voting books with Bluetooth, we've got some real problems. Otherwise, we just need to then be collecting all devices at the 100-foot zone, because there's still that Bluetooth connectivity, whether it's in your pocket or you're actually using it. So I think this will put us on the track to some good precedents for our voting locations, and I hope for your favorable consideration. I close.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, very much. There's no objection. The bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill is left pending. Chair lays out House Bill 1968 and recognizes Representative Cook to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee members, appreciate the opportunity to lay out House Bill 1968. As a former local elected official, and I see that we have at least one other former city council person in the room, this bill really relates to small subdivisions that we all represent, and really focuses probably on smaller cities and school districts that want to make sure that they have good elections. And so, again, I appreciate the opportunity to lay House Bill 1968 out. It makes a simple but important update to the election code to improve election administration in our state. Currently, counties may, but are not required to provide election services to political subdivisions such as cities, school districts, or special districts. And under Section 41.00D, the counties are required to provide services in odd-numbered years, but not even-numbered years. And so this bill basically has, as you can see, it repeals Section 41.00D. That's how short the bill is. But the effect of it is treating odd-numbered years and even-numbered years the same. As far as contracting, the county still has the right to set the rates on what the cost will be for the services provided. So we just want to make sure it's consistent, so that the elections are consistent. We support smaller political subdivisions, reduce confusion for voters, and strengthen public confidence in our elections. And I'd be glad to answer any questions and appreciate the opportunity to close when appropriate.
Yes, sir. Members, any questions for Chair Cook? Ms. Swanson?
Yes. Now, did I understand you to say the counties have to provide the election services in odd years but not even? That seems backwards.
Right, I agree with you, but yes, that is what the law currently requires.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I think I would speculate that the argument is that because they're holding an election in that year, that somehow they wouldn't be able to then turn around and have an election in May. I think it's plenty of time considering when the elections take place. As far as primaries take place in early March, city or municipal elections take place in early May.
So you're saying, okay, this is only about May elections, the whole bill's about May elections?
That's correct.
Okay. So right now they have to provide them in odd years, but not even years. I get it, okay, because
it is
of
subject to
the
a
conflict
pay
of
scale,
primaries and primary
Yeah, so the
runoffs.
county gets to set, look at their cost, for their
You're right.
manpower and things like that, and
Yes.
machines, and set the rates. And so that's the safeguard for counties, is they get they have the schedule, and as far as contracting, it's subject to the pay
Okay, but currently they can provide that service, but
That-
they don't have to.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Mr. Raymond?
Thank you, Chairman. Is this a vendor bill?
It is not. But thanks for the question.
Any other questions? Okay, Chairman, we'll recognize your right to close. We have one witness.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chair calls Ed Johnson, Harris County Ballot Security, and yourself. Hello, sir. I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You are representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill.
That is correct.
Welcome, sir.
Yes. So to give a little history here of how we got to where you're not having, requiring counties to hold these elections in even numbered years. It's you have the primary, which is in March, and then you have the May election, and then you have the runoff. And how we got into this weird scenario of having a May election in the middle of the primary and the runoff was the federal law that required you to mail ballots overseas 45 days before the election. Well, that's really 75 days that you have to start working on that in order to get a ballot out in the 45-day period. So for that, we had to move the May elections, or the runoff elections, which used to be in April, it used to be 30 days after the primary, to the end of May. I can name scenarios that we've had in Harris County where, like the Obama-Hillary election, where there was a primary election and actually Texas made a difference in who was going to be their president. We deployed just about every piece of election equipment we had in the election office at that time for that March primary. And then also in Harris County, we have 500 districts that could hold an election in May. You know, you could look at the worst storm here. If I have another primary like that where all the equipment's in the field, it takes us a month and a half to get the election equipment back out of the field, then turn around and have a big May election, you wouldn't have enough equipment to do this. And so the exception made here a long time ago when all this was being hashed out of when to put these election dates is that counties would not be responsible for elections on the even years because you could possibly not have enough equipment. If you force this bill, you're going to make counties buy more equipment to cover that in case you have two large elections in a row with that you can't recover your equipment and get it back in the field in time.
Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1968? Do you wish to testify? Okay, come on up and register.
I registered, but I didn't sign up to testify. So if you can just change that
Hold
last
on
name.
1 second.
Marteau. Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, ma'am, I show you registered as Sophia, is it Mirto?
Yes.
And you are here representing yourself and you're testifying for the bill?
Yes.
Okay, well, you may proceed. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. So I really appreciate what the gentleman just said. I think the very easy fix to that is to use the $33-ish billion fund of money that Texas has to just make sure that we have enough instant equipment for everybody. I would also like to say that I actually lived overseas for 5 years, and it's very, very important that overseas deployed military and overseas Texans are able to vote in elections. And I totally understand that the counties may not have enough workers, they may not have enough stuff that they need to make this happen. We should just make sure they have it, because our elections are the backbone of our democracy. And I'm very surprised actually to hear, because I live in Travis County and we always have all of our elections, that not all elections are even covered by this. All right, I mean, I'm just shocked to hear this.
Members, any questions? Ms. Plessa?
So you're talking about the rainy day fund? I'm just trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just, because Texas has a lot of money. We're the
Yeah.
largest economy in the world. So I was just trying to confirm. You're talking about the rainy day fund.
Or whatever fund is available. I mean, I'm sure you guys know more about that than me.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for
Thank
being
you.
here. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1968? If not, the chair recognizes Chair Cook to close on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. If government had more mentality like private businesses, they would be looking for opportunities for more business, so to speak. And so that's what I would say is that, we need to expect more from our government. And like I said, I think the most important thing here is that you will have consistent elections if the same people are providing the elections, whether it's an even numbered year or an odd numbered year. And I know that our Harris County representative has stepped away, but if there's necessary to carve out, I'm happy to exclude counties of 4.5 million or more.
Thank you, sir. Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir,
I
very
close.
much.
Thank you.
If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. The bill is left pending. Chair lays that House Bill 2279. Recognizes Representative Schofield to explain the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members. As you are all aware, serving on this committee, one of the requirements to be eligible to be a voter in Texas is that you're a citizen of the United States. That's also a requirement to serve on a jury. But in a jury pool, we pull from both the voter rolls and the driver's license rolls. So we do get people who are not citizens who get called in, and one of the ways that you can be excused is to swear under oath that you're not a citizen. And that's a perfectly acceptable thing if you have a driver's license and you're not a citizen. However, we also have people who are swearing when they get into the jury pool that they are not a citizen and therefore also not eligible to vote, who are on the voter rolls. We tried in Senate Bill 1 in 2021 to fix this problem by setting up a system that basically requires us to investigate. And we give 30 days, we give all this notice. What this bill says is, if you swear to us that you are not a citizen under oath, we will take your word for it. And we will remove you from the voter rolls that you have told us you're ineligible to be on the proof of your having sworn this. Now, the one complaint, now, first of all, there's no complaint about it being non-citizens. There's no question a non-citizen cannot vote and isn't eligible to. By removing a non-citizen, you're not removing any eligible voters. So the question that I get is, well, what if the guy just lied to get out of jury duty and said he wasn't a citizen? You're taking away his fundamental right to vote. Well, first of all, again, we're taking his word for it when he swears that he's not. But secondly, if he was just lying, which is a crime because that form is a government document, he can go back the next day and go register to vote because he'll meet all the requirements to register to vote. The question of whether you prosecute him for lying on the jury form is a whole nother matter. So it's a really simple bill. We only had 259 cancellations in all of 2022, despite the fact that 2 counties alone, Bexar and Tarrant, had almost that many people. And my staff's research is that amongst the other counties, Collin doesn't remove non-citizens from the voter rolls at all because the government process is essentially voluntary. El Paso doesn't even ask for the citizenship information. So again, it's really simple. If you're going to swear to us that you're not a citizen, we will believe you, and we'll take you off the voter rolls so that you don't inadvertently register to vote when you're not supposed to. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will reserve the right to close.
Okay, members, Mr. Raymond?
Thank you, Chairman. So do you have some idea, like how often, because I don't, how often or how many people, asked to be excused because by saying they're not citizens? Do we know?
Yes, TPPF did some research, and they said that on average, the Secretary of State's
TPP what?
Texas Public Policy Foundation. They did some research and found that on average, the Secretary of State's office gets about 600 a month. But again, a lot of those are people who never claimed to be a voter. They are taken off the driver's license rolls. We really have not had a good handle on how many of them are actually on the voter rolls. And so this would just say, all we're going to do is and it's the same process we have now, it just adds to the list of things. If you,
So if we pass this, and you'll know because you're good at all this stuff. So let's say we pass this and somebody goes in there, they're in the jury, and they ask to be excused and they say, I'm not a citizen. Boom, you're gone. But they were registered to vote. And then, I guess, so then your bill would then, or your new law would then
add them to
start
the
a
list.
process where they're going to be removed from the voter roll.
Yes. There are 7 currently. There are 7 categories of people that the registrar is to remove.
Okay,
It's
well,
not
let's focus
voluntary.
on this one.
This would make the 8th.
Okay, so let's focus on number 8. So then they get removed from the rolls and they go to vote, and because they want to vote Shaheen over here, chairman, and because he has close races, and they go to vote, and it's like, you're not registered. And wait a minute, what do you mean I'm not registered, right? So, does the current law contemplate, or does yours contemplate then that, because then they say, well, I am hey, I'm eligible, and they register again or whatever. Does something happen where it goes back to the county officials and say, hey, this guy lied when he said he was not a citizen? And do they get, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They go get in trouble?
The bill doesn't go the extra step of saying, now we're going to go back to the jury system and say, hey, this guy lied when he told you he wasn't a juror.
Yeah.
I don't contemplate that in here. What I thought you were going to ask is, does he get notice that he's been removed? And that's the current law for the current 7 categories. You do get notice that you've been removed.
So he'll know before he goes to vote.
He'll know that he's not on there.
Yeah.
If he showed up unregistered and didn't know, maybe didn't look at his mail,
Right.
he would get a provisional ballot and it would not count because he's not on the voter registration rolls.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering, yeah, I wasn't going there. I was going to whether or not he gets popped back there for having lied about it.
And as you know, people lie about different exemptions from jury duty, and
Yeah.
almost nobody ever gets prosecuted.
Yeah. Well, we got to do something about that. Thank you.
Ms. Plessa? Ms. Isaac?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. Did you say that per TPPF, the Secretary of State is removing around 600?
No,
What
they're
did you say?
receiving 600. Part of the process is that when you swear that you're not a citizen in jury service, we send that to the Secretary of State, and that starts the process where they go and they notify them, they give them 30 days to. And
Okay, they
it's just
receive-
not resulting in a lot of people getting off.
Okay.
Again, of those 600, I do not anticipate, and I don't have the numbers, I don't anticipate the majority are people who are registered to vote. I
Okay.
anticipate the majority of people who have driver's licenses, and that's how they got on the jury wheel, I'm presuming.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Plessa?
Thank you so much, Representative. Can you repeat what you said about Collin County again?
And I didn't do this research myself, so if I know it for a fact, I will tell you. My staff said that Collin does not currently remove non-citizens from the voter rolls, as they view the entire process for doing so as optional. I don't know if that's still in the wake of the 2021 law. That seems odd to me.
And especially for Collin County.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to call Collin County out until I'm sure
sorry.
that people didn't
I
get it
represent Collin County, so I feel like I could say that. Okay, well, I'll have to have a conversation there. But, so are you familiar with Eric?
Yes.
Was this something that was being done before Texas left Eric?
No, what Eric does is it would match you with other states to see if you're registered to vote elsewhere. It didn't have anything to do with the jury, with the jury rolls.
Okay, thank you so much, Representative.
Okay, thank you, sir. We will proceed to testimony. Chair calls Ed Johnson, representing Harris County Ballot Security and Self. Welcome back, sir. I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You are representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you are here to testify for the bill.
Correct.
All right, well, you may proceed.
Boy, this is a great bill, I tell you. Been working for 15, 16 years, Representative, right, on trying to get this piece of legislation passed. Back when I used to work in the voter registration office. And yes, I would say when I was there, and we saw these jury summons, because also the district clerk is supposed to send you the jury summons to the voter registration office. About a third of them were registered to vote at that time. So it is a fairly good percentage of these people. If you were to go to DPS and you were to tell them that you're not a citizen and sign a sworn statement, they would not let you register to vote. They've said this. So why in the world are we, when you come in and filling out a jury summons and signing a sworn statement that you're not a citizen, do we keep you on the voter roll? Because the law clearly says if you're not a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't be voting. So it's just common sense here, and it would save a lot of time and resources, because the action is now this notice is being sent to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State then enters it and sends it to the county. The county then ends up having to mail this voter a letter. They have 60 days to reply to this letter. If they don't reply, then they get removed. If they reply, then they got to come and prove that they are or they are not. It's a huge overhead nightmare. Let's just take them at their word. And if they say they're not a citizen, they're not a citizen.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
Chair calls Kathy Hagler, representing herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Kathy Hagler. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, you may proceed.
Okay, so voter registration is not my area of expertise, but as you might guess, I've still got something I want to say to you about it anyway. So I Googled Texas sample jury duty summons, and the first link went to a document on texascourts.gov where I found a document that is attached called Model Jury Summons Questionnaire.pdf. So I printed the double-sided form for you. And of course, many counties don't use this exact form as long as you contain the same minimum information that's required by law. And I highlighted in orange the first side that says, are you a U.S. citizen? There's a Y box and an N box. There's only one other statement in that box. It says, please note below. So I highlighted the note below for you. It says, note, if you state that you are not a U.S. citizen, you will no longer be eligible to vote if you fail to provide proof of U.S. citizenship to your county voter registrar. So on the back side of that form, which is a two-sided form, I highlighted what the voter has to do to disqualify themselves for jury service based on citizenship, or they have to circle whatever they are, or the reason that they're saying they're ineligible. There is no possible way to not understand what you checked yes or no on one side and also incorrectly circle the reason that you're ineligible on the other side. And then, of course, at the bottom in yellow, I highlighted the warning and penalty for providing false information to be excused for jury service. So by claiming to not be a citizen to be disqualified for jury service, that currently invokes SOS Form 21-46, which I've given you a sample of. That's what they have to send to the voter to prove their citizenship. That's the second attachment. And on the back side of it, just so that you'll have it, is the election code that is what causes that form to be there. So if this person thought that jury service is a joke and they checked the no box for citizenship in their jury summons, they are the person who put this activity into motion. Now that person has two choices. Either admit that they lied on the jury summons and provide the county registrar proof of citizenship to stay on the voter roll and possibly be fined, or don't provide the county voter registrar proof of citizenship within 30 days and forfeit your right to vote. And I know some folks may think this is weird, but I think jury service is a high privilege and a high duty, and we should take it seriously and not be light about it. The rest of my testimony is on your written form. I got 15 more seconds,
Yes, you
okay? Just so the bottom line is, if we pass this bill, I think the new note will say, if you state that you're not a U.S. citizen, you will no longer be eligible to vote, period.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you so much for being here. Chair calls Susanna Carranza, representing herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Dr. Susanna Carranza. You're representing yourself and you're neutral on the bill.
Yeah, and this is a very odd position for me.
Okay.
And the reason I'm neutral, because I didn't have enough time to kind of dig through into the whole thing, but my biggest concern, and this is what happened in the past every time Texas have tried to remove non-citizens from the rolls, is that a lot of notices with very short time for answering back and saying, like, no, this information is wrong, was sent incorrectly to people, because there are a lot of people with similar names. And then I was just looking, when you're doing your jury duty, you don't necessarily link that to a social security number. So how can you ensure that you actually sending that to the person who received the jury duty summons? How do you 100% ensure that you're not cross-referencing something that is the wrong person? And the bill doesn't address that. And every time you could be sending out, which Texas has seen before, sending notices to, I forgot the number, but there was a huge number of letters to non-citizens were sent, and many of them were actual citizens. But because you only have a short amount of time to respond, we disenfranchise or remove a lot of people from the rolls who were actually citizens. So that's my biggest concern. Are you getting the people who actually said that, and they're the right ones? Because the match is kind of hard to do.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Chair calls Ken Moore, representing yourself. Welcome back, sir. I show you registered as Ken Moore. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
Yes, sir. That's
All right.
correct.
You may proceed.
There is a bit of a storm brewing between voter registrars and election integrity groups dedicated to voter roll cleanup. Section 16092 says a voter desiring to challenge a registration must file with the registrar a sworn statement of the grounds for the challenge that identifies the voter whose registration is being challenged and states the specific qualification for registration that the challenged voter has not met based on the personal knowledge of the voter desiring to challenge the registration. Now, the controversy revolves around that phrase, personal knowledge. What exactly does that mean? And if you attend a man's funeral and you see him laid in a casket, does that count as personal knowledge? If you drive to his address and the voter, and whether he's registered, and you find a vacant lot that's grown over, is that personal knowledge? Now, I'm giving this kind of a backdrop, though, in regard to someone's registration. If I give if a man puts on goes in and he puts on a form, of all places, a government form, and swears that he is not a citizen, what greater form, what greater proof can you have that the man is not a citizen? The man himself is going to be in a better place than anyone else to know what his immigration status is. And I don't see how that can be controversial to say that the man says, I'm not a citizen, and swears to it. We take his word for it.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for coming to testify. Chair calls Emily French with Common Cause Texas. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Emily French. You represent Common Cause Texas, and you are here to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir. You
All
seem
right.
surprised.
No, welcome, and you may proceed.
Thank you. Under Section 16.033 of the Texas Election Code, if a person responds to a jury summons to say that they're ineligible because they're not a citizen, the voter registrar currently must send the voter a notice of examination for proof of citizenship. This is not a voluntary process under the Election Code. If they do not provide proof of citizenship within 30 days, their registration will be canceled. This process exists now without HB 2279 in law to prevent non-citizen voting. The notice of examination process helps keep people from being wrongly purged. It's not just non-citizens and people who lie on jury forms, it's also mistakes who get safeguarded by that 30-day period. The bill would eliminate that process and cancel a voter's registration immediately. Last fall, the Texas Tribune identified Texan Mary Howard Ellie, a fervent Trump supporter whose registration was canceled in Montgomery County for non-citizenship. Ms. Howard Ellie is a born and raised U.S. citizen, but her county claimed that she responded to a jury summons saying she was not a citizen. Ms. Howard Ellie denied this. She said that she asked to be exempted from jury duty because of guardianship duties for 3 of her grandchildren. Somehow the wires got crossed. This bill would boot Ms. Howard Ellie immediately without offering her due process to prove that her county made a mistake. Other eligible voters could find themselves in the same predicament if Emily French Sr. lives at the address with me, Emily French Jr., and this is my mother and she's not a citizen, and I just made her up. But if she says she's not eligible for jury service, they could flag Emily French at my address and boot me off the rolls immediately without that 30-day period for me to prove actually different Emily French. Current law includes a process for keeping non-citizens off the rolls, and I believe we should protect that process and stick to it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you for being here. Chair calls Veronica Warnes with the Texas Civil Rights Project. Welcome, ma'am. I show you registered as Veronica Warnes. You're representing the Texas Civil Rights Project, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, you may proceed.
I'm here today to echo my friend Emily French's testimony and also to express our deep concern about this bill and its attempt to remove safeguards around identifying possible non-citizens on the voter rolls. So in 2019, the Department of Public Safety and the Secretary of State's office incorrectly identified almost 100,000 individuals as probable non-citizens. The process of taking these individuals off of the voter rolls was only halted because of the requirement to send a notice to identified individuals and a subsequent lawsuit, LULAC v. Whitley. Because of that lawsuit, Texas entered into a settlement agreement to mitigate the damage caused by the attempted purge. Under HB 2279, all of those lawfully registered voters would have been unconstitutionally purged from the rolls by methods that were prohibited in that settlement. Principally, it would require a weak match to remove voters from the rolls, meaning someone's name and address matches the name and address of a person that the court reported as not being a citizen. This very problem is the reason why we have that 30-day notice and reply period now, which gives the person the ability to provide documentary proof of citizenship and cure any possible errors. This bill would undermine the settlement agreement the state of Texas and civil rights organizations reached in 2019 to deal with this issue. The settlement agreement was a step towards protecting the votes of newly naturalized citizens. It was codified and approved by the Secretary of State's office in 2021, adding an extra layer of oversight and accountability to that process. Citizenship status is complex. Government agencies are notorious for having out-of-date, incorrect, or incomplete information, and we should not disenfranchise citizens because of it. We urge you to reject this proposed legislation and to uphold the safeguards that were put in place by the 2019 settlement agreement. We need to ensure that eligible voters are not wrongly removed from the voter rolls. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Chair calls Andrew Eller, representing the SREC-E Committee and Secure Texas Elections LP Subcommittee. And yourself. Hello, sir. I show you registered as Andrew Eller, and you are representing the SREC-E Committee and Secure Texas Elections LP Subcommittee and yourself, and you are here to testify for the bill.
That is correct.
All right, welcome.
And keep it real short. I think those who've spoken before me on the bill that are speaking for the bill basically said what we were going to say. The only thing I will add to that is, you know, being a juror, it's a duty as a citizen to take that seriously. And when somebody flippantly, you know, signs off on not being a citizen so they can get out of jury duty, I find that a slap in my face because I've served on multiple juries through my lifetime. And, you know, it always seems I always get picked for the jury, or actually not picked, but I don't get struck from the jury pool. I guess I have that kind of face that the attorneys love. But anyway, I just find that reprehensible that someone would do that just to get out of jury duty. And we know people are doing that. Now, yes, there are accidents that do occur. It doesn't stop them from having to, you know, that doesn't stop them from going back and re-registering. But if they're doing it just to get out of jury service, it's a problem. And quite frankly, you do need to have to go through some hoops to fix yourself, you know, to get back right with the registration process if you've done that. So we are for the bill.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for being here. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2279? Are you registered and you're going to change? Okay.
I'm here anyway. I might as well.
Did you, hold on just one sec.
Yeah.
Did you register yet?
No. Can I have
Okay,
a form to register?
She'll
Thank
help you register, and then
Thank you
we'll
very much.
be happy to hear your
Appreciate it.
testimony.
you. 2279, right? Cool. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you for waiting for me. I completely agree. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, ma'am, I show you registered as Sophia, and it's Mirto?
Mhm.
Okay, and you're representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill?
I am.
Okay, well, you may
yeah.
proceed.
I completely agree with everyone who just said how important jury duty is. But we have a constitutional right to vote that is protected by multiple amendments to the Constitution, multiple civil rights acts. And if someone, for whatever reason, whether it's a mistake or they don't understand the consequences or they are being flippant, that's really a shame, but it does not give the state the right to deny them their constitutional right to vote. So that's basically my whole testimony, but I thought it was very important that that go into the public record.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
forward. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 2279? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Schofield to close on the bill.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, before I close, I get to clear up a slander against Collin County, one of our finest counties. My staff came running in and gave me their updated numbers, now, which is that they had 97 jurors in the period from December 2022 to 2023, 97 who were dismissed for being non-citizens, and from 2023 to 2024, December, 85. No list in here of whether any of them were registered to vote or whether they were taken off. Let me clear up a few things. Ms. Carranza's thing about mistaken identity. When you get your jury summons, as I said, you're either pulled from the driver's license list or the voter list. They will have your driver's license number or your VUID number on there. They know exactly who to strike. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be, it could be George Foreman, who named, I believe, all 7 of his sons George, but the one with that VUID is the one who's going to get struck. And by the way, they were all citizens. Secondly, we're not talking about purging or identifying voters. We're talking about self-identified people. Under no circumstances, anybody here going out and looking for people who are non-citizens. This is you telling us, I don't want to serve on jury duty, I'm not a citizen, or being honest and saying, I can't serve on jury duty, I'm not a citizen. And the last thing I wanted to clear up was the idea of newly naturalized citizens has come up before. First, you cannot already be registered to vote before you become a citizen. So when you show up and say, I can't do jury duty, I'm not a citizen yet, you can't already have been registered to vote, and no one is going to do that less than our newly naturalized citizens. They're probably amongst our most proud citizens. What's really going to happen if that's the case? If they go in there and go, I can't, I'm not a citizen, they're going to tell them, I'm going to be naturalized. They'll bump them to the next period so they can serve, and they'll be excited to do it. And in Harris County, you can automatically get a bump. You just, and I'm sure in a lot of the big counties, when you get your first jury summons, you can just automatically bump once. But so that was what I wanted to say about that. There's nobody who's going to break the law less than our newly naturalized citizens. Mm-hmm. And so, Mr. Chairman, short of any questions, I would close.
Thank you, Mr. Schofield. Ms. Plessa?
Yes, thank you so much. So I 100% agree with the intent of your bill. And thank you so much for clarifying Collin County, because I was about to get on the phone.
I was afraid of
questions.
This one might be okay. You would have killed them, so I had to be very careful
But I
about
do
that.
have a question, because one of the witnesses brought up the Whiteley settlement, I believe, the settlement. So I guess they were saying that the settlement restricts the state from relying on data collected before a person's voter registration. So can you kind of clarify some of that up? So
And again, that was what I was saying. That was the state looking for people on the rolls who weren't citizens and misidentifying them. Again, that has nothing to do with this bill. This bill is totally for people who self-identify. And there's no other way to be affected by this bill than to self-identify at jury duty that I am not a citizen.
Members, any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Schofield. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. The bill is left pending.
Thank you, members.
Chair lays out House Bill 2803 and recognizes Representative Hayes to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Last time I appeared before you, you might remember that I laid out a very simple, bipartisan, one-word bill. Today, I have another relatively simple, short 40-word bill. Under current law, if a poll watcher is refused for service, the watcher must be provided a signed statement of the reason for the rejection. However, if a poll watcher is accepted for service and then is subsequently removed, there is no requirement to provide a signed statement. House Bill 2803 would require that if a presiding judge removes a poll watcher, the presiding judge must provide the watcher a signed statement containing the reason for removal. Polling dynamics between election officials and poll watchers can range from professionally cordial to tepid to tense, or in some cases hostile. Oftentimes, issues that arise can be addressed and the poll watcher can continue service. However, sometimes a poll watcher is removed from service. This bill does not change the who, what, when, where, or why of removing a poll watcher. It only adds this requirement, aligning the removal of a poll watcher in line with rejecting a poll watcher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield for any testimony if there is any, and reserve the opportunity to close.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hayes. Members, any questions? Mr. Raymond?
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know if it's happening a lot, or, I don't know.
My experience is about, in each county, like up in North Texas, probably have about 1 or 2 per election.
So this
per
is
county. It's not like it's 1 or 2 at each polling location.
Yeah, so this is simply saying they got to give them they got to write down why they're doing it, right?
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't say by when.
Well, you would do it at the time of the removal.
Well, it doesn't say that, does it?
Well, let me look at my exact wording.
Because these bills, man, these are ones that every word counts.
Well, it says, yeah, it just it just says the presiding judge
shall
provide to the watcher.
All right, boom, we're
signed
going to do an
statement.
amendment to that. We're going to do an amendment to that.
Yeah, so he's no
Like
longer.
when they do it,
Yeah.
you give it to them right then. Is that do you think you could work with us on that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yes, sir.
you're doing this for the poll watcher side. I'm helping you here because you're doing this
Yeah.
for the poll.
I just figure he's no longer a poll watcher if he's been removed.
Yeah, no,
So-
but you're doing it. But this bill is for them. It's not for the judge, right? You're doing this. You're doing this to help the watcher who's been removed, right?
Yes,
That's
so
what-
it would be easy enough to add at the end at the
I mean,
time of the removal.
I'm asking you. Isn't that what you're doing this? I mean, the person that'll benefit or whatever would be the person removed, right?
Yes,
Like
sir.
they got something in writing. So if you're trying to help them, just you might. It's up to you, but you might want to put something that says if they give it to them right then or something, or within an hour or something,
Yeah. We can just put-
Before that poll watcher takes off to try to go do something legal or whatever. How he kicked me out, no good reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could add at the time of removal.
There you go. You're welcome.
Members, any other questions? Well,
Chairman.
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
I can't go with you on that elephant bill, man, so I'm gonna go with you on this one. I'm trying to help you on the other committee.
May I approach the member?
No. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. We'll recognize your right to close. We'll proceed to testimony. Chair calls Ed Johnson with Harris County Ballot Security and Self. Hello, sir. I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You are representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you are here to testify for the bill.
That is correct.
All right, you may proceed.
So I have seen this problem numerous times in Harris County. You got to remember that these election judges have a lot of authority. On that election day, they have the same authority as a district judge, and they can hold you in contempt and put you in jail, and we have seen that happen. And with no statement at all, no findings, no anything. They can call the constable, or they can actually deputize somebody right there on the spot to haul you out. So this would be at least a good thing to put some kind of documentation into the process of why you're having this person removed. So because it always goes to some litigation afterwards, usually.
Members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Dr. Laura Presley with True Texas Elections.
Curious what's going on here.
Ma'am, I show you registered as Dr. Laura Presley. You are representing True Texas Elections, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke with the representative's staff, and what we'd like to see on the bill, and since it probably is going to be modified now with Representative Raymond's suggestions, is some sort of penalty. Talking with the representative's office, I think the intent of the bill is that since the watcher was accepted and now they have been removed, that 33.061 penalty, Class A misdemeanor, would be in effect. If the representative does not want to add that into the section that he has added, we'd like him just to clarify, at least on the record, that it is intended that to remove a watcher incorrectly and not according to law, the law says you have to have violated something in the code to be removed. And that the intent of the bill is that that's a Class A misdemeanor. So that is our, he could either put it in explicitly or at least say it out here. Second, it would be nice if we could also reconsider watchers for recounts, watchers at the early voting ballot board, watchers at Central County Station. The other places watchers are, that if they are removed incorrectly, that this would apply also to them. So those are some suggestions, but I would like to change my position to be for the bill.
So, Dr.
we could do
Laura
that.
Presley, with True Texas Elections, you want to be registered as for the bill, supporting the bill?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I would ask the representative, the author, if he could clarify if he intends this to be a Class A misdemeanor, whether he puts it in explicitly or at least he testifies to that intent.
You know, he's a really nice guy.
I
bet you if you
know.
go to his office.
I
and
did,
you
and
are-
they told me no.
Oh,
And I
well.
said, well, I'm going to say it here in front of him. And now since Representative Raymond has given a suggestion, maybe this could be added in.
Chairman.
All right, Mr. Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to be clear. What are you saying that you believe? What is a Class A?
It's a Class A
for who?
misdemeanor to obstruct a watcher. It's 33.061.
So you're saying you want it that if the judge removes a watcher, and at this with this, what he's talking about here is then that the judge has to give them in writing why they're doing it. And where does your Class A come into
The
play?
Class A is if they're removed not according to law. The law says you can only remove a watcher if they have violated the code or breached the peace. So if none of those things apply, then the watcher's been removed inappropriately or illegally. And I've trained 1,200 watchers, Representative Raymond, across the state in the last 9 years. This happens a lot. Watchers are removed from the polls, from central count, from recounts, from ballot boards.
Is it
And-
still the case? I started reading this stuff when I was 16. I was an election judge at 19. And so I'm familiar, and a lot of it is still the same. But is it still the case, for example, that if you're a poll watcher and you leave, you leave the polling place
Yes, sir.
and go out, that the judge can at that point say you can't come back in? Is that
No,
still-
sir, that's been removed.
So
There
they
was a
have- They have
five.
to let you come back in?
Yes, sir. You may have to bring in another appointment form. Some judges are very flexible where they let you leave and come back. If
Well,
you-
they can let you, they can, it doesn't say that they can't. I'm asking, they can let you come back in, but is it their discretion?
No, that's
So
not.
they have to let you come back in?
They do. Either they
Well, you just said
can.
they can let you back in. So they can or they must?
They
You don't
they
know?
must. If you bring another appointment form, they must let you in.
Another appointment form from the same
From the same
candidate
thing.
or from another?
Yes, yes. There was a 5-hour rule that you had to certify. That's been removed from the statutes.
What, the what now?
There was a 5-hour rule that if you left, you couldn't come back.
Have you were gone for 5 hours?
Yeah, if you were not there for 5 hours.
Right.
Yeah, so that's been removed.
So you can go in and out as you please?
Absolutely.
Well, I don't like that.
Well,
That's not good.
that's the statute right now.
Well, we may amend this one. I don't know. No, I mean, I didn't know that. Do you know that, Chairman? No, sir. I don't think that's good. I think it was a good law before that if you left, you couldn't come back in. What do you think?
I think it's fine. There's no reason, if someone has to deal with picking up children from school, they come back and watch in the afternoon, They watch in the morning when the polls are open, make sure the zero tapes and all the procedures are followed. They come back later in the evening and make sure the results tapes are printed on election day in the evening. You're covering the two ends that really are the most important. We have watchers do that all the time.
Fair
Yes.
enough. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Bless y'all. Thank you.
Chair calls Kevin Hale with the Libertarian Party of Texas and also representing yourself. Hello, sir. I show you registered as Kevin Hale, and you're representing the Libertarian Party of Texas and yourself, and you are here to testify for the bill.
I am.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
you
I
may
am.
proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman Shaheen and members. The Libertarian Party of Texas supports House Bill 2803. We find it not only does it keep the judges on point by making sure they give a good reason, I think the unintended consequences are that you're going to have better watchers because now they know they can get removed and they're going to be more on point and less aggressive, let's say. So we're in favor of the bill. I left you a whole big thing on printed up, but I'm not going to go through all of that. Y'all can read it later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for being here. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2803? If not, the chair recognizes Representative. Oh, okay. Hold on, Mr. Hayes. I'm sorry. Are you registered, ma'am, or so you just need to change it?
I'm going to testify. I wasn't going to testify, but I want to offer a different perspective here.
Oh, okay. Hold on, just one
I
second.
am registered, yes.
Okay. So let me confirm what we have in the system. So we have you registered as Jennifer Doinoff, and you're representing the Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself, and you're neutral on the bill?
I thought I had put for the bill. Neutral.
You're
I put
registered
neutral.
as neutral. What
Okay.
would you like it to be?
So neutral's good.
Okay.
But the comments that I wanted to make is I'm hearing a lot about how this is for poll watchers, and immediately when I read the bill, I started thinking about how it would help judges and me in my position. Because I always think it's better to have documentation, and this law or this bill is consistent with not accepting a poll watcher, so I think that's easier to train on, and the expectation is set. And I can tell you that we have had instances where we've removed poll watchers and we didn't have the documentation, and then by the time the case came up, it was a year or so later. So I think this is helpful, and so that's what I wanted to say to the bill.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Our members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, for coming up.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2803? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Hayes to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the suggestion by Representative Raymond, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I will add that, but because of the timing of where we are in the session, I'll do that as a floor amendment if that would be permissible, Representative. And then in regards to the suggestion maybe of the criminal penalty, I felt like the section in the election code dealing with poll watchers, there's a whole chapter on it, chapter 33. I thought that adequately covered it, but I'll be happy to personally visit with the Dr. Presley and look at that and decide if we need to tie something in here and make a criminal penalty. But I wasn't trying to criminalize the act independently. With that, I close.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill is left pending. Chair lays out House Bill 4253 and recognizes Representative Gertis to explain the bill, and the chair offers a committee substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, for the opportunity to present House Bill 4253. House Bill 4253 provides a new objective standard to maintain voter rolls. This bill sets the objective standard for an inactive voter as someone who has not voted in the two most recent general elections or any election between those elections. HB 4253 does not move voters who only vote in presidential elections to the suspense list. On June 11th, 2018, the Supreme Court of the United States in Houston versus Randolph Institute held Ohio voter registration maintenance process that uses voters' inactivity as a reason to send a voter confirmation under the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 was valid. HB 4253 mirrors the language of the Ohio legislation. This bill requires a voter registrar to send a voter confirmation notice to all voters who, as of November 30th of an even-numbered year, have not voted in the previous 25 months. A voter who does not respond is placed on the suspense list. Since this occurs after November 30th of an even-numbered year, it means after a voter failed to vote in both a presidential and gubernatorial election and any elections in between. Like the Ohio law, it would take 2 general election cycles before a confirmation notice is sent and 2 election cycles on the suspense list before a voter is removed from the rolls. This means it would take 4 general election cycles before a voter is completely removed from the voting rolls by not being responsive or not voting. This bill does not make any other changes to Election Code 15.051. The new underlined text simply takes current law and arranges it in a clearly readable format. So sections 1 and 2 are current law, and HB 4253 only adds clause 2. Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned earlier, I would like to discuss the committee substitute. The committee substitute clarifies the authority of the Secretary of State to defray expenses for counties if the legislature chooses to appropriate money in a contingency rider in SB 1. It only clarifies that if the legislature appropriates money, the SOS can provide grants to counties like they currently are authorized to do so for other voter registration activities and election administration. I'll be happy to take any questions, and I'd like to reserve my right to close.
Yes, sir. Members, any questions? Ms. Plessa?
So essentially, your bill just says if you don't vote, you get taken off the rolls?
No, it doesn't. It's and not being responsive
What does that mean?
to for the when they mail out the confirmation for if you hadn't voted
Okay.
in the past 25 months,
Okay.
then you are mailed one of the confirmations, to a voter confirmation, and you have 30 days to turn that back in. If you don't do that, and you go through 2 more general elections.
So 4 years?
4 years, correct. Then an additional 4 years. Then you were taken off the voter rolls.
So you don't vote for, you said 25 months?
The previous 25 months on the even-numbered year starting from November 30th.
So I don't vote for 25 months. I get a card
In the mail.
in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little card, like a postcard, or what?
Yeah.
Is it an envelope? And then...
It's not one of those big glossy campaign mailers, you know.
Oh, well, I
we
would
can't
hope not,
afford to
because
do
those are
that.
very expensive.
Yeah.
And if the state's paying for that, then we have to have a conversation. So it's a little card, and it says, "Hey, Mihaela, you haven't voted in the last 25 months. Please respond to this." And then I don't respond to it for 4 years. And then I get taken off the roll?
Right.
I'm just trying to sit with that a little bit, because to me, like, voting, I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, voting is like a right.
Right, it is.
Okay,
Yeah, it
and
is.
so
But
I have.
So if you're on the suspense list and you go to if you go vote, you show up with your driver's license,
And then you're.
and then then they check and make sure it's you and your driver's license and whatnot, and then they hand you your ballot, and then you're off the suspense list. That's being responsive by going to vote, because, you know, obviously if you're on the suspense list, then you hadn't responded to what they had mailed you.
Okay, I'm gonna listen to the witness testimony.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir. We will proceed to
Thank you.
testimony. Chair calls Ed Johnson with Harris County Ballot Security, and yourself.
All right.
Welcome back, sir. I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You're with Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
Yes.
Okay.
A great bill. Something else that I've always been waiting to see happen. And there are Pew reports and things that show that probably almost about 10% of the voter roll is bad data. When I was working in the voter registration office in elections, that's the statistic that basically we saw. Until HAVA went in, there was no validation check on the data that was ever typed in. So if someone mistyped your birth date or your social security number, it was that was on your record. And now when you're trying to match it to other voters, well, you never get a hard match. So this bad data just has been floating on forever. In 1970, for 4 years, the state didn't require you to give a birth date. And so we have thousands of records out there that voters with no birth date that we never can match to see where they have moved to. And that's basically what this bill is doing, Representative. It's an 8-year process. So you're including, if you don't vote in 2, a presidential and a gubernatorial, that's your 25 months. If you miss both of those elections, you get mailed a confirmation notice. And a confirmation notice is a notice saying, do you still live here? And what's really nice about that, by law, it's required to be forwarded to wherever you live. So if you have moved to a new state, that confirmation notice will get forwarded to that state and get you registered there. If you move to a different county where you would have to re-register, it's going to be forwarded to that new county to help get you registered. And that's really the intent of this bill, is try to get people registered where they vote. Let's get rid of the bad data that's floating around out there and get people registered to vote where they actually live, because that helps them vote on election day. That's one of the best things that you can do to help a voter, is get them registered in the correct location, because, Busey, Representative Busey had a bill on the limited ballots and everything. Well, that's how you fix this before Election Day. You get people registered where they live, and this confirmation notice is the process that we have in the state for doing this. It's forwardable, it's sent. If by some chance you don't reply to it, then you have 4 more years to update your address or reply. If you register to vote, if you go into DPS, every 6 years you're supposed to have to go get your license renewed. So when you went into DPS, you would get your stuff updated. You would get your voter registration updated. And that update takes you off suspense. So it's an 8-year process. So in 8 years, if you don't make a contact or update your voter registration, then you may get canceled from the roll. But it's a long time, and it helps clean the roll up.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Plessa.
Is this something that could have been taken care of if Texas still stayed in ERIC?
I do not believe so. The first part that I talked about, the incorrect data, where we don't have birth dates, where we have bad driver's license or social security numbers on those records, no, ERIC had no attempt to clean that off, because you can't get that hard match with another registered voter when they did get the correct information entered.
Okay, so I'm just trying to sit with this because, voting is very personal to people. And if they're not inspired to go out and vote for a candidate, they're not inspired to go out and vote. And I don't know how you feel about voting, but like I said before, I believe that voting, is a right. So I guess my question to you is, should your right to vote be taken away because you freely decide not to use it?
No, I don't think it should be taken away, but that's not what this bill is doing. This bill is cleaning up the voter roll. It's in an 8-year
How is it cleaning up the voter rolls?
8-year process, we would eventually get rid of this bad data that's in the voter roll. And that's going to be a long time. And in that 8 years, you're going to get, notices mailed to you saying, hey, update your address. Do you still live here? And odds are they don't live there, and it's going to get forwarded to where they do live, where they're going to get registered, so they can vote wherever they are now, in that new county, in that new state.
But how, once again, my question is, how is it cleaning up the voter rolls? By removing people, right?
The bad data that's on there?
But how do you know it's bad data? Because I guess I'm.
I have seen it. So I know it's bad data. You see,
Okay,
you can see I have two
can I ask the
records for.
question?
Well, let me say, I have two records for Ed Johnson on there. One of them, the driver's license is typed incorrectly, and the other one isn't. But that's not a hard match on the driver's license number, so the incorrect one never gets taken off the voter
But
roll.
I guess what I'm asking you is, why would we question someone's residence just because they haven't exercised the right to vote?
Because odds are if you miss 2 federal elections, you probably don't live there anymore, or you're probably not participating. And if you are, if you just chose for 4 years not to participate, you still have another 4 years after that to show up, and or just to make any kind of thing. When you went in to get your driver's license renewed in that 8-year period, you would be updated and you would be taken off. So if you're following state law, you will not be removed from the voter roll.
Mr. Toth.
How deeply flawed was Eric?
It was very deeply flawed.
So my daughter was gone from Texas for the better part of 9 years, was never removed from the voter rolls.
Correct. No, Eric was not doing a good job.
Ms. Isaac.
And if I can follow up on that, the Secretary of State is actually engaging in kind of building their own system where they're making agreements with these other states to try to clean up make sure you're not registered in
What's
two
the
different
danger
states.
of someone being on the voter rolls and someone being able to steal her name and vote with it?
I will tell you that it's a very high danger. That's how these vote harvesters and ballot harvesters get a lot of their votes is the records like this that are floating around out there that they can take advantage of.
Ms. Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, if someone hasn't voted in 2 general elections, maybe they've moved out of the state, maybe they've moved, and they do vote by mail, and that ballot is being sent to that home, that would be maybe open to fraud. Someone could use that ballot and mail it in and it not be the person.
Yes.
Right. That's what we're trying to say here. And I think that is what Representative Plisa is trying to ask, like, how is this cleaning it up? Because it's cleaning it up by taking it off so that someone can't steal that person's ballot.
Or you're stealing that person's vote, because if that is happening where you have a vote by mail ballot going out and that person tries to show up on election day or early voting, they're going to be turned away. They're going to say, hey, you already got a ballot by mail, and they weren't the ones that received this. So cleaning up the voter roll really helps the voter, and this is a great tool for doing that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Kathy Hagler, representing herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Kathy Hagler. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
That's correct,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So currently under section 15.051 of the election code, a voter registrar must send a confirmation notice to a voter if the registrar notices that the voter registration address is a commercial post office box, or if the registrar has any reason to believe that the voter's current residential address is different from that indicated on the records. That's that first notice that we're talking about. If the voter does not properly respond to the confirmation notice, they're placed on the suspense list. A lot of times the reason they're placed on the suspense list is because you mailed them a voter registration card, which is not allowed to be forwarded, and it comes back to them, so they're on the suspense list. All right, so they are unable to cast a ballot without documenting their residence using a form described by section 15.054. Remember when they walk into the polling place, the magic question, do you still live at 123 Main Street? And they say, oh, no, I moved. You fill out a statement of residence. We've got the correct residence now. Now, all of this is no more. Now they're caught up and they're current on their registration. So According to the current law, HB 4253 would require a voter registrar to send a confirmation notice to a voter who, on November 30th, following a general election, had not voted in the previous 25 months. Now we're giving the voter 2 bites at the apple to update their voter registration and avoid being canceled. Obviously, if they have voted, we're not worried about it anymore. That clock has stopped ticking. They are updated. So this HB 4253 mirrors Ohio legislation, which has already passed legal scrutiny to cancel the voter registration of a voter who failed to respond to a confirmation notice and who has not voted or updated their voter registration in 2 general elections occurring after the confirmation notice was mailed. I would add that this bill is a companion to SB 396 by Senator Colkhorst, which passed in the Senate State Affairs Committee by a vote of 9 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 absent, and was engrossed by the full Senate on April 1st. So it's very, there's a lot of activity on this bill. It helps to maintain the voter roll if the registered voter fails 2 attempts to cure the defect. I think it's a great bill. I think they have every opportunity to fix it by voting or by filling out a statement of residence, and they get 2 different opportunities to fix it before this goes into effect. So I ask you to support the bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any question? Thank you, ma'am, for coming up.
Thank you.
Chair calls Dr. Susanna Carranza, representing herself. Hello again, ma'am. I see you registered as Dr. Susanna Carranza. You're here representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill.
Yes, I'm Dr. Susanna Carranza, and this bill is just terrible. And this bill is just terrible because we should always make all efforts to keep people eligible in the rolls. Any chances of making massive mistakes should not be done. And there are many reasons why a voter decided to not vote. And even if you say like, oh, it's 8 years, it's like garbage. So what if, let's get a specific age, right? What if you're an elderly voter who have always lived in the same place, who voted a lot of times, but as they get older, they decide, okay, I'm going to sit a couple of elections out. Like once you're like older, like maybe 8 years might not feel like much. And even like, and then how many people like get overwhelmed by mail and might not notice something? And also, mind you, that the county already sends every 2 years the voter registration card that bounces if the person no longer lives there. So there's already a mechanism to check if a person no longer lives there. The problem with this bill is that it requires the voter to actively look at the mail and reply to something despite having any evidence or any reason to believe that the voter moved there. It's just because they didn't show up to the polls. And mind you, an elderly voter does not need to update or doesn't have a reason to renew their driver's license. And they can vote with expired driver's license, like forever expired driver's license after a certain age. So you could be easily disenfranchising a lot of elderly voters who might not notice their email or might think, they are asking if I am me. I always live here. They must be a mistake. So they might just ignore because they think, this can't be me. So why we would do something that is already addressed in the law, because you already sent every 2 years voter registration cards that will bounce if a person no longer lives there. Why would we change something that already works? It will cost the county more money because it's another round of mail that you have to send for something that's just not, there's no evidence for anything. It's just because the voter didn't vote. That's absurd. Please reject this bill.
Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Chair calls Jennifer Doinoff with the Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Jennifer Doinoff, and you are representing Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And actually, I'm not going to take your time because it sounds like there's a committee sub on potential funding, and that's what I was going to talk about. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions? Chair calls Sophia Murto, representing herself. Welcome back, ma'am. I show you registered as Sophia Murto. You're here representing yourself, and you're going to testify against the bill.
I am going to testify
welcome.
against the bill. This bill would basically keep a record of how often citizens vote, and if a citizen has not voted in the past 25 months, it would require that a citizen answer a letter sent to them in the mail to confirm that they are an eligible voter. We cannot claim that this bill will do anything to prevent non-eligible people from voting because it specifically goes after citizens who are already registered to vote. So I hope we all agree about that. The state already keeps track of which citizens are eligible and which are not due to felony convictions. This bill would put the responsibility in the hands of the citizen to prove again and again, potentially, that they are eligible. This is adding bureaucracy, and it's the opposite of small government. The state would have to spend tax money to hire more people to send out these unnecessary confirmations. People have already mentioned that we have a system that works. And double check people who are obviously eligible voters who are just not voting, as you so eloquently stated. Voter registration laws here in Texas are already some of the most restricted in the country, harder to vote here than 49 other states, according to the cost of voting index compiled by political scientists at Northern Illinois University and Jacksonville University. That's not something that I'm proud of as a Texan. It's shockingly punishing to remove voters from the rolls who just haven't voted in the past 2 years. I see no consideration for people who may have moved, who don't regularly check their mail, who are traveling out of state or just out of town for a couple of months, for letters getting lost in the mail, for citizens living overseas and deployed military service members. The vast majority of voters skip the midterms and only vote in the general election. This would potentially disenfranchise the vast majority of voters in our state. It's also, I'm very concerned about this language. The registrar has any other reason to believe that a voter's current residence is different from that indicated on the registration records. This is so vague and could be used to justify calling into basically anyone's eligibility into question. I'm really shocked that such vague language is being considered, and I implore you not to waste time and taxpayer money moving this bill out of committee when it can be challenged in court on the grounds of violating the U.S. Constitution, Article 6 of the Texas Constitution, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, and the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. It's also just, like, we have so many problems that we need to be fixing. As we said, apparently our counties don't have enough money to hold all their elections. And apparently we are like using very vague ways of telling, you know, there's so few non-citizens is my point. Like the actual number of people that are not allowed to vote, that accidentally vote or try to vote is extremely few. I have yet to see any verified data on people stealing mail-in ballots. So I would like, you know, us to consider that as not a real problem until we see actual data to back that up. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Chair calls Emily French with Common Cause Texas. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Emily French. You're representing Common Cause Texas, and you are here to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. I'm handing y'all, you're getting my written testimony now. It's, you know, totally beautiful, very inspiring. I would read it all out. It's, you know, about freedom and stuff. But I do think that this bill is punishing folks who vote infrequently, folks who are not inspired by every presidential candidate, by every candidate every 2 or 4 years. And I am very confused as to how the author is getting to the 8 years figure, because when I read the text of it, it is voters who are not already on the suspense list and have not voted in any election during the previous 25 months, so that's just over 2 years, plus like 25-ish days till November 30th, plus 30 days. I think the max that gives us is, what, 27, 28 months? I don't understand where the 8 years figure is coming from. I'm very happy to be wrong, and I'll talk to the bill author on that and try to figure it out. But I was there on the Senate side as well on this bill, and it's identical text, and I don't believe 8 years or any number that high ever came up on the Senate side either. I'm also concerned about the cost to the county or the cost to the state, depending on the the committee substitute, and I think that the outcome of this is just that, you know, obviously I'm very annoying to all the people in my life about getting out there to vote every single time the polls are open, but I also think that folks in Texas should have the right to not vote if they're not inspired, the right to come in, you know, every 10 years to vote for a candidate without being purged from the rolls, especially voters like my parents, plenty of people in Texas who live in the same house for 30 or 50 years and don't move.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Ms. Plessa?
Yeah, so I kind of want to go back to line 17 of this bill and kind of go through it, because the way I read it, I read it the way you're reading it, which is it's anyone who's missing one general election.
Right. I think 25 months would, and I wish I had a calendar in front of me, but I believe it's 2 general elections because of the way that would fall. And I'm not great at mental math, so I'm very sorry.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to get some clear, because I was kind of seeing it, I was kind of reading it the same way you're reading it as well,
Right.
so I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
The election code defines a general election, I believe, as either a gubernatorial or a presidential, not a primary, not a May election, one of these big November even numbered year elections. So that 2 general elections would be 24 months.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for coming forward. Chair calls Veronica Warnes with the Texas Civil Rights Project. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Veronica Warnes. You are representing the Texas Civil Rights Project, and you're here to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, welcome.
All right, so this bill is problematic because it will purge thousands of eligible voters from the voter rolls. Our first concern is with the requirement that counties send every voter not already on the suspense list a confirmation of residence every November 30th following a general election if the voter hasn't voted within the previous 25 months. I'm also unsure of where the author is getting this 8-year number. I do actually have the election code definition of a general election, which is an election other than a primary election that regularly reoccurs at fixed dates. That would clearly apply to both the midterm and presidential elections. Many voters only vote in either presidential or governor elections, yet this section would require any of those voters who only care about one race every 4 years to submit proof of their residency or get their voter registration canceled. This proposal is inefficient at its best and malicious at its worst, in that it's requiring counties to waste taxpayer dollars sending out these confirmations of residency that are completely unnecessary. We already have a process for confirming residency under the code. Adding in this provision will just unnecessarily remove eligible Texans from the rolls. I will remind everyone that the right to vote is not use it or lose it. We are just as concerned with the vague language in subsection A3 of the bill. It says that a voter registrar has any other reason to believe that a voter's current residence is different from their voter registration, that they be sent this form. This is far too ambiguous and open-ended, leaving it prone to abuse by bad actors. There are no guardrails built into this proposal to protect voters from being disenfranchised by bad actors who conduct a Google search and, with no other evidence, challenge the validity of a fellow Texan's voter registration. Allowing this kind of nefarious conduct harms our elections and does nothing to alleviate concerns about election security. For these reasons, we ask you not to report HB 4253 favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Ms. Plessa?
Thank you so much for your testimony. You're talking a lot about voter impacts and people being removed off the roll. I have a voter impact statement in my binder. I guess this is from the Elections Committee. Is that right? So that's where this came from. Anyways, I'm just going to read you some statistics that's off of this, and I just want to get your reaction to it. So I'm going to start with my district, House District 70 in Collin County. Active voters at risk of purging from this bill, 14,916 individuals. That's 14.6%, 50% of those individuals being people of color. And then I'm going to go to the representative on this committee that's going to be the most impacted, Representative Penny Morales-Shaw, House District 148 out of Harris County, 27,634 individuals, 30.5%, 77% people of color. And then the third highest would be Rep. Valerie Swanson, Harris County, 24,834 people, 20.7% and 53% people of color. So what is your reaction to that?
That is completely unacceptable. Frankly, I mean, the right to vote is not use it or lose it. Voter registrations are there, they are fixed. People can update them. If there's some reason for a disqualification at a later date, we have a process for that. If there's any uncertainty about a person living at their address, we have a process for that. But literally not being active in every single election as a person who tries to vote in every single election as a voting rights attorney, it's not always possible. And people are not always inspired to do so. It should not be, contesting their voter registration should not be based on whether or not they are an active voter. Voters are allowed to participate in the democratic process as frequently or as infrequently as they want. It's a right.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 4253 and its committee substitute? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Gertis to close on the bill.
So this isn't taking anybody's voting rights away. This is upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. This bill is constitutional. The Supreme Court said that we are not taking away a person's right to vote for failing to vote, but because the person did not return the address confirmation. That's what was upheld. This is an objective way to clean up the voter rolls. It doesn't care if you're Republican, Independent, Democrat. This is an objective standard to be able to clean up our voter rolls.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
With that, I close.
Okay. The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none. The bill is left pending.
Okay, where we at? Chair lays out House Bill 5115 and recognizes Chairman Shaheen to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chair Raymond and members of the committee. House Bill 5115 seeks to create consistency in statute relating to the punishment for committing election fraud. Under current law, election fraud is a Class A misdemeanor. HB 5115 enhances the penalty to a second-degree felony. If the individual is an elected official, the penalty increases from a state jail felony to a felony of the first degree. Finally, if a person is found to have attempted voter fraud, the penalty increases from a Class B misdemeanor to a third-degree felony. Election fraud is a serious offense, and this legislation will make the punishment for these types of crimes consistent with other election-related violations. These changes will bolster the penalties for election crimes and will further ensure the public's trust in our election system. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, any questions? If not, do we have witnesses?
Reserve my right to close.
Chairman, we'll call you up to close in a minute. Ed Johnson? Usual suspects?
That's right.
The chair calls up Ed Johnson. Well, wait a minute. Eddie.
I don't know what my iPad did when I sent that in.
I've been a chairman. I know how to do this stuff. Let's see. Chair calls Ed Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you are listed as the Harris County Ballot Security. You're representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself. Why did it say retarded?
I don't know why it went did that. I guess it was reading my mind when it, put it in there.
There's something's wrong there. So, did you put the word
I did
retarded
not
in
put
there?
that in there. I don't know where the heck that came from.
Okay, well, anyway, you are for the bill. Please, please proceed. That's what it said. I just wanna make
That's
sure
right.
There's not a point of order here, man.
That's right.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, this is a big problem that when it's working in Harris County, we're even in ballot security trying to get election fraud cases prosecuted. You know, we would, this is even when it was a Republican DA in Harris County, we'd take these cases to them, show them the evidence we had, and they would say, okay, well, we can spend, you know, so much time working this misdemeanor over here, or the traffic ticket, or do you want us to go after, you know, people committing rape, murder, things like that? It's, you know, priority here. Well, of course, you would want them to be working the more serious crimes, but election fraud is a very serious crime, and I think we should have the penalty match. And you're not going to get any prosecutions until it's a substantial penalty where, you know, law enforcement will take the time to do it, because they'll spend, you know, hours and hours researching a case to end up with a misdemeanor to have it let go. So I really strongly support increasing the penalty and making them consistent across the board.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Chair heard none. Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair calls, click on here, let's see. How do I get to the next? Are you, oh, okay. Chair calls Ken Moore. Mr. Moore, as you come up here, you're, it says SREC SD 11, representing yourself.
That
And
is
you
correct.
You are from House District 29, Representative Jeff Berry.
Yes,
You're from Pearland, is that right?
I am.
Okay, you for the bill?
I am for the bill.
Go ahead.
Okay. Something that needs to be kept in mind with these increasing penalties. A few war stories from my county. And my county, I've often made the point that I've never seen any evidence of an attempt to commit fraud. I've seen some dumb things at times. And that's what I've had to keep an eye on. We had poll watchers sent out the last election. And we had, during early voting, we would send them to, quite often we sent them to the same place, you know, one day after the other. And we had a couple of election judges who tried to compel them to bring a letter of appointment for each time they came. Well, you don't have to do that. I made a few phone calls, and come to find out, the judges themselves began to question what they were doing. And so they called in to find out, is this right? And once they found out, no, that's not the way you do it, they corrected, they self-corrected. We've had a situation where during an election for referendum, some judges were handing out voter guides from the League of Women Voters. Again, you can't do that. Anything that's not sanctioned by the Secretary of State, you can't be handing out. Phone call made, problem corrected, and that was the end of it. And there's several other things that happened. But in each case, again, a phone call was made, the people fixed the problem, and as far as I was concerned, the problem was solved. That was the end of it. I didn't pursue it any further because I had people there who wanted to do the right thing. They just got caught making a mistake, and it happens to everybody. The increase in penalties here, though, are not for people like that. They're for people who are, you know, aggressively ignoring the law and not doing what they're supposed to do. And in cases like that, you do need a stick that's big enough to get their attention. And I think this bill helps address that, and so I ask you to please move forward.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Chair calls Kevin Hale, my personal favorite. Mr. Hale, you are legislative coordinator for the Libertarian Party of Texas, and you represent yourself as well, and you are against the bill. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Between 2004 and 2020, there were exactly 138 convictions for election-related crimes in the entire state of Texas. We feel like this is an overreaction to a very small problem, and we fear that this bill will actually cause those that process our election to reconsider the risk versus the reward of the entire endeavor. So we would ask that you would do not vote this through to the next phase. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Nobody? Thank you very much. Chair calls Dr. Laura Presley. Doctor, you're with True Texas Elections and have a great last name.
Thank
and
you.
You're for the bill.
Yes, I agree.
All right.
Thank you. Yes, we love this bill. This is a needed increase in the penalties. It makes it more now consistent with the penal code. There's Chapter 33 of the Penal Code for computer crimes with regard to modifying a DRE, a direct recording electronic voting system. This has been long needed to make that stealing of one's vote or adding votes that are not there consistent with that chapter of the penal code. We have seen, personally, I have seen issues, and I've gotten reports from our watchers, and I'm going to give you a few examples why this is important. We have a county where the poll judges were instructed and given instructions how to put blank ballots into the ES&S ballot marking devices without checking in a voter, where you could just put in a code, it'll spit out a vote how you want it to vote. Judges in this county, I'm not going to say which county, were instructed how to do that. The big problem is, how come these ballot marking devices, you just put a code in and you can now cast a ballot? We have seen ballot boxes at recounts. This is a Dallas County recount. 1/3 of the ballot boxes had no seals, or the seal numbers did not match the judges that they signed off at the polls. I've done open records requests on audit logs of the main computer, where the whole election day entry of memory sticks into the computer were omitted. There was no record of what happened on election day. Memory sticks were put in, but it wasn't on the audit log. We need this bill. We need the increased penalties to make it harder to commit fraud and make it more consequential.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Or actually, thank you very much. I couldn't pass that up, Chairman. Is that it? Is anyone else that is there anyone else who would like to testify on for or against House Bill 5115? Chair sees no. What young lady over here?
I just signed up just a second ago.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Chair calls Sophia Murdo. Pronounce your last name?
Mirto.
Mirto.
It's Italian, but Marto is fine.
Mirto. Sophia Mirto. You are listed representing yourself, and you're against the bill. Is that right?
I am against the bill. And I want to clarify that I'm not against having legal consequences for this issue, first of all. What I want to make sure is entered into the public record and that everyone knows is that the ramifications of this, an attempt is a third-degree felony. Conviction is a second-degree felony, and if an elected official is convicted, it's a first-degree felony. Well, you know, these are nonviolent offenses, and they are very serious crimes, but they are nonviolent. And Texas has an incredibly high prison population that costs the taxpayer an incredibly large amount of our tax money every year. It costs, on average, to house an inmate in Texas jail for 1 year, $17,000. $340,000. This is a lot of my tax money that I do not want to see going to jail people for nonviolent offenses. The other clarification of this is, you know, a second-degree felony is 2 to 20 years. I mean, that's an incredibly long time. And because it's also a very wide, like the judge can say 2 or 20 years, that means that we're looking at some people potentially being convicted for 2 years and other people for the exact same crime potentially being convicted for 20 years. That gives a lot of leeway for the state of Texas to, unfortunately, we have a tendency to sentence different kinds of people here in Texas for different, amounts. And I, in a jail, have more of a chance to get 2 years, but my friend who is black has more of a chance to get, statistically a worse sentence for the same crime. So I'm very concerned about this. Also, someone just said it will make it harder to commit fraud. This is a punishment after the fact, so it will not make it harder to commit fraud. And some of these offenses that are in this bill were already considered election fraud. It's also adding extra offenses. And again, I do think that we should punish people for this offense, but I absolutely see no moral justification. I see no tax justification. And I'm very concerned about trying to put more people in our jail systems when we already pay so much taxpayer money to jail our neighbors for nonviolent criminal offenses. Thank you.
So you like the law, the penalties as they are now?
I am happy if we do not threaten people with years of jail time, put them in violent prisons with violent offenders for a nonviolent crime. So as it stands now, I'm not going to say I'm happy necessarily, but I have no argument with how it stands now. This is just the concern that we're threatening people with 2 to 20 years in prison at a taxpayer cost of over $17,000 per person per year.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Nope.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Is that it? Huh? Yes, somebody else? Oh, Chair calls Dr. Susana Carranza. You're representing yourself and you're against the bill, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you, go ahead.
And I kind of second what has been said by the couple of folks, because it's not that.
If you, let me just,
Yes.
if she pretty much covers it, it's
No,
okay.
no, no.
We can
I
move
want to
on.
just stay brief and then add a little bit.
Okay.
So I don't oppose having consequences for actual election fraud, but they're also rare. So we're kind of addressing a problem that almost pretty much never happens. What I really have a problem with is disproportionality. You are getting, escalating to one of the highest forms of punishment, overpopulating our jails that are already overpopulated for something that is nonviolent, for something that almost never happens, and something that is after the fact. So there is such a thing as appropriate punishment for different things. And this is higher punishment than some types of violent crimes. And I don't have the specific list of every single thing, but there are some attempts of actual violence offenses that are getting less than this. So disproportionality is a big problem, and how our justice system interprets and how they apply to different kinds of folks is also a big thing. And also, we have private prisons, and that's just I don't want to send more people there.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is that it? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on for or against House Bill 11511? Sorry. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on for or against House Bill 5115? Not. Chair calls Chairman Sheen. Close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I close.
This time, thank you. Members, any other questions? No? This time, Chair withdraws House Bill 51. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. House Bill 5115 will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Chair's bill left pending. All right. Okay. Chair lays out House Bill 5430 and recognizes Chairman Sheen to explain the bill on behalf of Chairman Wilson. Oh, back up, members. Chair offers a committee substitute House Bill 5430 and recognize Chairman Sheen to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I'm pleased to lay out for you House Bill 5430 for Chairman Wilson. This legislation amends the Texas Election Code to prohibit candidates from filing applications for a place on the general primary election ballot or for nomination by convention with more than one political party in the same voting year. If a candidate violates this rule, they will be declared ineligible for the general primary election ballot, nomination by convention, and for the succeeding general election as an independent candidate, a nominee of a political party, or a write-in candidate. The committee substitute clarifies that the prohibition of candidacy does not apply to nonpartisan municipal elections by adding the word partisan on page 1. With that, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully reserve the right to close, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions for Chairman Sheen? All right, Chairman, we'll call you back in a minute to close.
Thank you, sir.
Chair calls Kevin Hale. Mr. Hale, you're listed as Legislative Coordinator of the Libertarian Party of Texas, and you represent yourself as well. And you are against the bill, is that right?
That is correct.
Go ahead.
Kevin Hale, Libertarian Party of Texas, we're against this bill. This, at best, should be a party rule, not a law. This is exactly what I told the Senate when this came up, that they're mad because this gentleman actually caused a runoff, and I told them that that's not the candidate's fault, that's a voter turnout. That's a voter result. So what I'd like to say here is that this should be a party rule, just like it is in the Libertarian Party, not a law. And we really need to keep this option available for, a unifying candidate. For instance, New York has, you can be listed on several different party lines on their ballot. So I think we should leave this option available in case we do have a unifying candidate like Jesus come back and wants to run. We can always suspend our own bylaws a lot faster than we can change a law through the legislation. So at best, this should be a party rule, not a actual law. Thank you.
So, hold on.
Okay.
So, members, any questions? No?
Apparently you have.
Represent? Do you have a question? Okay. So you're saying that basically, it should be up to the parties, like if they want, let's say the Democratic Party and the Republican Party want me to run on both ballots, it's up to them, and that would be okay?
Yes.
All right. I like it.
I do too. I do too.
Thank you. Dismissed.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Dismissed.
Next. What else we got? We had some, do you have a question? No. Okay, go ahead. What? You click and put it on. Okay. Okay, Chair calls Ed Johnson. EJ, Mr. Johnson, you're listed as Harris County Ballot Security, representing yourself, and you're for the bill.
Correct.
That's right. Okay, go ahead.
So this has happened twice within the last 4 years. It is a gentleman, and I in the Senate got in trouble for mentioning his name, so I won't say his name here either. But he filed to run for State Board of Education, and actually filed under, the first time, 3 parties, including the Libertarian Party. And he was on the Republican and Democrat, and this last time he moved to a new state rep district and filed again, and he only filed on the Republican and Democrat Party. In the 1950s, there was a gubernatorial candidate, actually a sitting governor, that did this. And when that occurred, the state passed a law that says that if you're affiliated with one of the other 2 parties, you cannot be the candidate on the November ballot. So it's already in law that if he won any of these primary races, he could not be the candidate in November because it's against current law. But there is no law saying he can't file to do this. Well, in this last election, it was a 3-way race in the Republican Party. He got 5% of the vote, and he pushed that into a runoff. Now, you being candidates, the money and time that you spend on a primary runoff due to this, I mean, that was a total waste of time and money for these people to do. Plus, I got calls. I spend a lot of time in Giddings, Texas, in Lee County, where this occurred, because that's where my ranch is. So I was getting calls from people I knew there going, hey, the computer machines are messed up. They're going nuts. Someone's hacked them. And I said, why? Well, they got a guy's name was on the Republican Party ballot and the Democrat Party ballot. I'm going, well, yeah, that's what happened here. He filed for both, but he shouldn't because he can't be the end candidate. If he was the end candidate, if he was actually succeed getting elected by one of these, now you're causing a huge problem that the party then would have to hold an executive committee and get the precinct chairman in that district to elect a new candidate because you've gone past the primary. The executive committee of that county would have to go and select the candidate, which now we're subdividing or kind of round skirting the will of the voters to try to pick somebody. So this is not a good situation, and we really need to clean it up in the code.
Okay, members, any questions? Thank you very much. Is that it? Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on for or against House Bill, Committee Substitute House Bill 5430? Chair sees no one else. Recognize Chairman Sheen to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, if there's no objection, the bill, committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Bill is left pending. Okay. Which one? Okay. Chair lays out, is there a substitute on this or no? No? Chair lays out House Bill 3918 and recognizes Representative Plessa to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This should not be a controversial bill, but we are in elections, so let's see. This bill is about transparency. It's about reducing the burden on cities to investigate violations, and it's about respecting the rights of Texans to participate fully and legally in the political process without fear of stepping over invisible lines. Political signs are one of the most visible and time-honored way people engage with elections. They show up in front yards, on fences, and business windows, and at polling locations. They send a message. It's not just about candidates or causes, but about a community that's actively engaged. What many don't realize, however, is that the rules governing political signs vary widely across the municipalities in Texas. Current statute gives cities the power to regulate these signs based on local concerns, like traffic safety, aesthetics, or zoning. However, there is no requirement for cities to proactively share this information with candidates, campaigns, and residents. So what happens? Candidates unknowingly break the rules and property owners get citations they did not see coming. Campaigns spanning multiple jurisdictions face a patchwork of regulations with no clear guidelines. The results are confusing, frustrating, and potentially legal disputes that distract from the democratic process. House Bill 3918 is a straightforward fix. It simply requires municipalities that regulate political sign placements to publish those rules in a publicly accessible format, such as a website, so that campaign and citizens can comply more easily. Members, this bill does not restrict local control. It does not set new statewide rules. It merely asks existing rules be made visible so that everyone has a fair shot to follow them. I have some expert witnesses here. They're available to answer any questions for the committee. I respectfully ask for favorable consideration and am happy to answer any questions and reserve my right to close.
Thank you very much. Member, have any questions? All right, Representative, we'll call you back up.
Yes.
In a minute to close. Chair calls Emily French. Ms. French, you here? Ms. French, you are listed as being here on behalf of Common Cause Texas, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Sir.
Go ahead.
Political advertising is an important part of the electoral process. It's something that we encourage our nonpartisan election protection poll monitors to keep an eye on, and we know from that it can be very confusing. Different regions have different rules. Even within counties, you get that clash. This bill will ensure that everyone from the candidate to the poll watcher is playing by the same rules. We support this bill and ask you to pass it. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you very much. Chair calls Ken Moore. Mr. Moore, you are listed as being here. You are State Republican Executive Committee, Senate District 11, and you're representing yourself. Is that right? You're for the bill?
Yes, I am actually for this bill.
You are actually for it.
This is a
Thank you. Any questions, members? All right, go ahead.
What can I say?
Well, no, if you're for, that's it. You knocked it out of the park.
The author is correct in everything she said about this whole thing.
She's good.
Municipalities do have broader power to regulate the placement of campaign signs in their borders. And these rules need to be readily available for campaigns or for candidates to use them. And this is especially true in counties with county-wide voting, because any given county may have a number of cities, and they all have their own rules. And if you're trying to place signs in these municipalities, you get in trouble really quick if you don't know what the rules are. It makes sense to require them to just place your rule. We're not trying to restrict their rules per se, but just put it somewhere where people can find them. And to put it on the public website makes a lot of sense. And so I am for this bill and ask you to report it favorably.
You a good man.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Well, I'm sorry, I don't have any questions.
You have any questions?
So thank you. Chair calls Dr. Laura Presley, True Texas Elections. And Doctor, you are neutral on this bill, is that correct? Or have you reflected on it some more now?
Well, I've reflected on it and spoken with the representative, and we have just one concern about the language. I think it's line 13 of the bill. Oh, do I need to go back?
What? Yeah, so you did confirm you're neutral on the bill, is that correct?
Neutral. I'd like to
You wanna change it to-
change it to on. Change it to yes,
To
to
yes, yes, okay.
for, yes.
So Dr. Laura Presley with True Texas Elections, we're going to, with your permission, now change it from neutral to for.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions?
Can I finish
Oh, you
my,
had something
may I
else?
do my, may I do
Oh,
my
yeah, go ahead.
testimony? Okay, thank you. So line 13 of the bill has the terminology of or prohibited. And I think that it might be a little confusing to municipalities that they may allow signs to be prohibited when they can only allow to have defined rules. So the author, I spoke with her about that. I just don't want there to be any confusion on the municipalities'
say?
parts.
Does she-
She said she would be happy to remove the or prohibited.
good.
Yeah.
All right.
So then we support it.
Good catch. Thank you.
Bless you.
Members,
Thank
any
y'all.
questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair calls Kathy Hagler. Ms. Hagler, you're listed as representing yourself, and you're for the bill, is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I really like this bill. At one point in time, TxDOT was the keeper of the timing and placement of political signs. Although TxDOT disclaimer is still required on all the political signs, here's the advice you get from TxDOT when you go to their advice. 3 bullet points. It is illegal to place any signs on or within the right-of-way. This includes posting signs on trees, telephone poles, traffic signs, and other objects on the right-of-way. 2. Campaign signs along Texas roads can be placed on private property with the owner's permission. 3, before placing a sign inside of incorporated city limits, check with the city for applicable ordinances. So then there's a little pamphlet you can click on, and under FAQs it says, where can I place political signs? It says you can place political signs anywhere so long as they are not in the highway right-of-way, not in a location that poses a safety hazard, such as blocking sight to a driveway, and placed with the landowner's permission. Always make sure to check with the local authorities, cities, counties, etc., as they may have their own restrictions on sign placement. When can I place political signs? Cities and counties may have their own time restrictions for political signs. However, TxDOT does not enforce any timing restrictions, and that's everything you can find from the state right now. So if you've ever had campaign managers telling you what happens when they do this, you call City Hall to find out when and where you can place political signs, and you talk to about 7 people, and they end up saying they'll have to call you back in a couple weeks because nobody knows the answer to that. So this bill actually requires municipalities to post on their website when and where the signs are allowed. And actually, I kind of like the prohibit in there because if a city wants to say you can't put political signs in our city park, or you can't put political signs at City Hall, I think they need to have the ability to restrict certain places that might be city property where you cannot post. So I think actually prohibit is okay.
All right. Members, any questions? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Chair calls Ed Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you're listed as Harris County Ballot Security, and you're representing yourself. And it still says retarded on here.
Good.
You got to fix that next time you, I don't know what that is, but you're for the bill, is that right?
Correct.
Go ahead.
You've heard all the great testimony. One little funny story. Constables, you know, love to go around and do this. We had one constable in Harris County that had a county truck, and he would go around every night, and where he thought they were blocking views, he would collect a truck full of signs every night. So this is a good one to put out where you can put them and where you can't.
Well, I got to tell you, since the statute of limitations has run by decades, I used to go collect signs too when I was a young guy. I wasn't a constable, but I used to collect them. Opponent signs, not my opponents, but people I didn't like, you know. Anyway, all right. Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Is that it? Is there anyone else who would like to testify on for or against House Bill 3918? Chair sees no one. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for the engagement today. I really appreciate the bipartisan support on this bill. I will work with Dr. Presley on perfecting language that everybody in the room can be happy with. Like I said, House Bill 3918 is just a small but meaningful step forward towards improving civic access, and easing the burden on both campaigns and municipalities.
And let me tell you, Representative, it absolutely is. I'm glad you're doing this. I mean, I can tell you in Laredo, I run into this with especially first-time candidates, you know, they don't know what to do.
I was that person.
Yeah.
And I represent 4 cities, and it was very confusing. So
No,
thank you so
glad
much
you're
for your
doing it.
thoughtful consideration, Mr. Chairman and
Any
members.
other questions, members? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none.
Thank you. I
Bill
close.
left pending. Sir, thank you.
Point of order. Huh?
Chair lays out House Bill 2739 and recognizes Representative Isaac to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 2739, a thoughtful and necessary measure to strengthen the integrity and accuracy of our elections. This bill proposes a simple, common-sense requirement that the address on the voter's Texas-issued identification must match the address listed in the official voter registration database known as the VUID, Voter Unique Identifier System. The intent of this bill is a simple principle. Voters should only be voting in local elections where they actually live. Allowing individuals to cast ballots in local races from where they no longer reside undermines the very foundation of representative government and the principle that communities should choose their own local representatives. By requiring address consistency between a voter's ID and the VU ID, House Bill 2739 helps ensure voters are voting in the correct local elections. They are not influencing school board, city council, bond elections, or other local races where they do not legally reside, and the integrity of local elections is protected from inaccurate voter records. I'm expecting a sub that will allow individuals whose addresses do not match the vote to vote a limited ballot, including state and federal elections only. This allows voters to participate in the broader democratic process while ensuring they do not cast ballots in local elections where they do not live. Texas law already requires residents to update the address of their driver's license within 30 days of moving. House Bill 2739 aligns with voter ID laws with this longstanding requirement. Voters can easily update their ID address online, by mail, or in person through DPS. Those unable to update in time can still vote using a U.S. passport, a military ID, a citizen certificate, or they may sign a Declaration of Reasonable Impediment, a DRI, and vote a limited ballot. This is a safeguard to ensure local elections reflect the voice of local residents, those who pay local taxes, attend local schools, and rely on local services. House Bill 2739 draws a clear, fair boundary that protects the principles of local control without preventing participation in state and national elections. I respectfully ask for your support of House Bill 2739 as a clear, balanced, and necessary step to ensure Texans are voting where they live and only affecting elections in which they are legally entitled to participate. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I reserve the right to close.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am. We'll recognize your right to close, and we'll start public testimony. Chair calls Ed Johnson with Harris County Ballot Security, and yourself. Sir, I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You're representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill?
Correct.
All right, you may proceed.
Good bill here, I tell you. It's already state law that you have to update your driver's license when you move, and it's supposed to be your residential address in 30 days, and the voter registration code says you update your voter registration 30 days before an election to vote, and that's supposed to be your residential address. The two should match if you're telling the truth where you reside. This is probably one of the most confusing issues that I see we see with election workers, judges. People come in with driver's licenses that do not have an address that matches to where they're registered to vote. And gets very confusing. A lot of times voters get rejected for this issue because the judge didn't know the full, current election code and everything. If we cleaned this up and made it to where they were the same, I think it would be a lot easier on election judges to actually process voters through. And it is the law.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for
Thank
being
you.
here. Chair calls Kathy Hagler, representing herself. Welcome back, ma'am. I show you registered as Kathy Hagler. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So Representative Isaac has given us a great bill that I think is going to be easy for us to support. It requires the 4 forms of acceptable ID that are produced by DPS, the driver's license, election identification certificate, ID card, and LTC, to have an address that matches the voter registration record for that person. And as Mr. Johnson was mentioning, you should see election judges and clerks when we're in a training and we say, the photo ID is to verify that the photo matches the person you're looking at, who is the person on the voter roll. If the address on the ID does not match the address on the voter roll, that's between them and DPS. It doesn't matter to you if the addresses match. And people go, huh? And you get the deer in the headlight look like, what? They don't understand because it doesn't make any sense. Because you know what you're about to tell them next? You're going to say, you have to ask everybody the magic question. The magic question. Do you still live at 123 Main Street? And do you know why we have to ask that question? Because their voter registration residential address is not currently required to match their ID. That's why we have to ask the question. So does it make any sense to you that we would rather ask a verbal question that they may or may not understand, and they're going to give us a verbal answer that the judge or clerk may not completely understand what they're saying, and it's totally on the honor system when you say, do you still live at this address? And they say yes or no. When we're going to have the ID in our hand and we're going to have the voter registration record right here. If those two match, then it's really simple. We're not on the honor system anymore. Voting is a privilege. If you want to vote, there's currently 7 acceptable forms of ID, 4 of which are issued by DPS. It's not too much to ask that the ID you plan to vote with be current with your current voter registration residential address. So either update your ID or update your voter registration. And I know that DPS is kind of slow. We've heard about that a lot. So I think maybe we might want to consider that when you update your address with DPS on any of these 4 IDs, perhaps DPS needs to issue a receipt that contains that current residential address so that the person can still vote with the DPS receipt. And I didn't know that there was a clause in there about the limited ballot, which is a great idea for a substitute. But I do want to point out that a limited ballot can only be voted during early voting and not on election day. So that person's still going to have a problem. I think it's a really good bill to get people lined up with the voter registration record.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any question? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Dr. Susanna Carranza, representing herself. Welcome back, ma'am. I show you registered as Dr. Susanna Carranza. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, welcome.
And first of all, voting is not a privilege. Voting is a right. So let's get that out of the way. Second, the purpose of a voter ID is to prove who you are, not where you live. And this bill selectively disenfranchises people who choose to use driver's license, Texas ID, Texas EID, and have moved. Because if they just use a passport, they would not be disenfranchised. But what if they don't have one? So how can a person in the same situation be disenfranchised just because they happen to have an outdated driver's license? And if you're, to talk about using a receipt, yeah, you could use the receipt as a proof, but even to get a receipt, if you have to go in person because you can only update things online every other time, you won't even get a receipt when you try to fix things. So this bill will disenfranchise voters. It will actually selectively disenfranchise voters with uneven rules for people in different conditions just because they moved. And I'm not a constitutional scholar, but it really seems to me that if you're unevenly applying a law that restricts the power to vote to some voters but not others, that doesn't seem like it belongs in the Texas and the United States Constitution. I urge you to oppose this bill. Oh, and by the way, it's a poll tax too, because even just a simple change of address costs $33. And you might say that is nothing. It might not be nothing for some folks, but $33 might be the difference between having a meal and not for many voters. So stop making laws that make harder to vote. We should all want everybody to vote. If you are afraid of your voters, you should rethink your policies. Only people who are afraid of their own voters are trying to disenfranchise them. Please oppose this bill. Any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much for coming up. Chair calls Jennifer Doinoff with the Texas Association of County Election Officials and herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Jennifer Doinoff. You are representing the Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
So I understand the intent of the bill, and and agree with the intent of the bill. We do have some concerns, and I did speak with the representative about the concerns, particularly how it might affect elderly voters that you heard about earlier that have driver's license that are expired and don't have any reason to update them, and that may be the only form of ID they have. I think this could potentially affect those voters, or those voters that also, the elderly, that may be temporarily in assisted living centers or other things as well. And then, you know, we've spent a long time training our judges that this ID is to verify a person's identity, not voter eligibility. That's a concern that we have, that could be confusing to judges as well. And then I think this was already said, but other documents that are allowed on the list A don't have this information. So we're just taking one of the IDs and applying this rule. And then also, by mail voters don't have this requirement. So we just wanted to point that out as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair calls Mary Ibarra with the ACLU of Texas. Welcome, ma'am. I show you registered as Mary Ibarra. You are with the ACLU of Texas, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, welcome. You may proceed.
Thanks. Hello, members. My name is Mary Ibarra. I'm a voting rights strategist with the ACLU of Texas, and I'm here to ask you to oppose HB 2739. This bill would require that voter IDs from DPS have an address that matches the address on your voter registration. In 2017, after the state was sued on the voter ID law in VCV Abbott, this legislature revised the voter ID requirements in response to court findings that the law at the time discriminated against Black and Latino voters. Every election cycle, our team works in coalition with voting rights groups to offer nonpartisan public education on Texans' right to vote. There's also a hotline that voters call to get their questions answered on voting. Every election, we get a high call volume asking about our complicated voter ID procedures. We inform voters regularly that the addresses on their IDs don't have to match where they're registered because the ID is meant to prove their identity, not the residency. We just heard that. There are other non-DPS issued IDs that may be presented at the polls that don't have any address at all. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience. Almost 14 years ago, I left my home in the Rio Grande Valley to come here to Austin and attend the University of Texas. Since then, I've been a renter, and I move frequently, sometimes near elections. That means that the address on my ID is not always updated in time to match the new address where I'm registered to vote. As a matter of fact, in the last 6 years, I've moved 5 times. This law would have prevented me from voting in these elections. Let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with being one of nearly 4 million households that rent in this state. But there is no reason why being a renter should impede on my right to vote because it takes time to update an ID. The last time I tried to make a DPS appointment, I had to wait 4 months, and during that time, I had to wait for my appointment. My passport expired, and I had to send that in to get renewed by the State Department. The only form of ID I had during that time was my expired license. It doesn't make me less of a citizen, and even though I rarely use an expired ID to vote, current law allows for that to happen. When NBC5 investigated in DFW just last year the state's appointment system, they found the first available appointment in the DFW offices was 2 or 3 months away. For Fort Worth, the first available appointment wasn't until late January, almost 6 months away. 1, 2, sometimes 3 elections can occur in this 6-month time period for voters. As mentioned, we're also concerned about senior voters and voters with disabilities and their ability to get their IDs. It isn't intuitive, and frankly, it's burdensome for seniors to update their IDs when they move, and they shouldn't be turned away at the polls and have their right to vote denied. I hope you take my experience and the many burdens that Texas voters face when obtaining IDs into consideration and oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, very much for your testimony.
Thanks.
Chair calls Sophia Murto, representing herself. Hello again, ma'am. We show you registered as Sophia Murto. You are representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
It's important to mention that federal and state law already requires voter roll maintenance, and Texas enthusiastically complies with current law. I have grave concerns about the legality and constitutionality of this bill, specifically the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, and Article 6 of the Texas Constitution. As a taxpayer, I do not want my tax money to be spent defending this legislation in court. The language of this bill seems self-contradictory. Specifically, election officers may only accept documentation listed if the address on the documentation matches the address on the list of registered voters. But the list of registered IDs in this bill that are valid include a military ID, a passport, and a naturalization certificate. None of these documents have addresses listed. This will confuse our citizens, our election workers, and I'm concerned that it will lead to eligible voters not being able to use their constitutional right to vote. There are a lot of reasons why someone has an old address on one of their documents, and most of them have to do with access, time, and cost. I take issue with the claim that updating your documents is easy. Under current Texas law, voter registration stops 30 days before an election. What happens if someone moves or changes their address during that 30-day window? Under current Texas law, driver's license updates can only be changed online. Every other change, meaning citizens have to go to the DPS office to change their address, depending on where you live. Appointments can take weeks and are only available during working hours. This would disproportionately disenfranchise elderly voters, voters below the poverty line, single parents, Texans working jobs without paid time off, busy working people, and voters who have trouble accessing transportation or who live far from DPS offices. I see no consideration for our military who may be temporarily deployed, disabled veterans, disabled citizens, working people, unhoused citizens, or Texans who have recently moved. What about transplants that have just moved to Texas? How are you going to change your documents quickly enough? We already have regular checks, and last year Travis County removed at least 5 citizens from the voter rolls. Again, the assessment from the Travis County tax assessor collector and voter registrar was that non-eligible voters is a very small issue. Finally, getting a copy of your license costs the taxpayer $33, even though we're already paying taxes. Requiring citizens to pay to access their required documents is by any definition a poll tax, which is illegal according to the 24th Amendment to the United States Constitution. I will quote, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay tax or poll tax." The 24th Amendment was passed in 1964. At the time, 5 states maintained poll taxes, which disproportionately affected African-American voters. Texas was among them. To be absolutely clear, the poll tax exemplifies Jim Crow's laws and aims to disenfranchise black voters and institute segregation. Please consider the constitutions, your citizen constituent, and the integrity of protecting the validity of our democracy by protecting our right to vote. I'm genuinely not sure what problem this is trying to solve, but this bill is threatening voter access for thousands of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much for coming up. Chair calls Luis Figueroa. I figure I was close. Sir, I show you register as Luis Figueroa.
Luis Figueroa.
Figueroa, awesome. And you are representing every Texan, and you're here to testify against the bill?
That's correct.
Okay, well, welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Luis Figueroa with Every Texan. We are in opposition to this legislation. And in all honesty, I think of all the bills we've heard this session, this bill gives us the most concerns. We believe it's the most problematic bill we've had. Number one, because it encourages gaming the system. The purported intent is to make sure the person lives in the jurisdiction, but then provides alternative IDs, including the passport and military ID and U.S. citizenship that don't have your address on there. So basically, you're basically telling the voter, if you don't have an address that matches, and maybe you don't even live there, just bring a different ID, and then you can go vote. So now we're just basically gaming the system by bringing different types of IDs. Two, it takes 2 to 6 months to get a driver's license. I just looked it up on the DPS application. It varies obviously from place to place, but on average, it's taking about 2 to 6 months. So the receipt is not an acceptable form of ID right now, so I don't think that change is going to work unless you're going to add more identification to ID. It has a disproportionate impact on non-homeowners, students, low income, Latinos, and blacks. I can assure you this will lead to a lawsuit. This is going to be a voting rights violation. It's at least going to be alleged, and it's going to go to court if you file this. And I am saying that as a former voting rights attorney. IDs are about matching identification, not address, as we've heard. And I do have concerns about the limited ballot. We've said that's only during early voting, which leads to another level of confusion. And also, it's not ideal if you're disenfranchising voters for some elections and not others based on an identification system, which basically just means, again, going back to my original point, people are just going to come back with a different form of ID no matter where they live. And now we have this kind of weird gaming of the system. So really encourage you to just let this one go. Happy to be a resource, and maybe we can get at it a different way. But I think the way it is drafted right now is hugely problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, very much. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for coming
you.
up. Chair calls Emily French with Common Cause, Texas. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Emily French. You're representing Common Cause Texas, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. You may proceed.
Thank you. I'm here to testify against this bill because I believe address matching does nothing to prove a voter's identity. It adds no security for elections, but does add a great deal of difficulty for voters. Voter ID laws are meant to ensure that the person who checks in at the polling place is the person who is on the voter rolls. Poll workers can check the face, check the name, and check the voter in. This process needs to be quick to keep the lines moving. I believe Ms. Hagler illustrated that the magic question that they ask solves this problem. If poll workers need to start checking addresses, we could see added time and longer lines. My grandmother, a great lady, she would want me to say here in front of the committee, she turned 90 last June. She does not drive anymore, but which we don't know if she knows that, so please don't tell her she doesn't drive anymore. But because she's over 70, she can still use her expired driver's license to check in when she votes. Luckily, she still lives on her own, but if she needs to move in with one of my family members, her address will change. HB 2739 would require elderly Texans like my grandmother to update an address on an expired ID in order to vote. Her expired license clearly shows who she is, and she can keep her registration address accurate on the voter rolls by updating it online. Do we really need elderly Texans to update their address with DPS, pay for a new ID, wait for it to arrive in the mail, and switch out with their otherwise identical ID just so they can keep voting as they always have? As my colleague Luis noted, it takes between 2 to 6 months to get a driver's license. There are 70 counties in Texas that have no DPS office at all. And if someone needs to use a reasonable impediment declaration and the other bill that this author has before the committee passes, then they would be burning their only chance to use a reasonable impediment declaration. This would also impact and burden elderly voters, voters with disabilities, college-age voters, and Texans who regularly move houses or apartments. This bill requires address matching for DPS-issued IDs and handgun licenses, but there are no addresses listed on military ID cards, U.S. citizenship certificates, or U.S. passport, so this bill cannot require them to match. In addition to gaming the system, this makes no sense to consider some IDs safe with no address, but other IDs safe only with a current address. So we ask you not to vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming up. Cool. Chair calls Veronica Warms with the Texas Civil Rights Project. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Veronica Warms. You're representing the Texas Civil Rights Project, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Good to see you
thank
again.
you.
All right. We have many concerns about the disenfranchising effect of this bill, but I'll name just a few with my time. You'll also hear from my colleague David in a minute. We want to echo the concerns that have already been displayed about elderly voters and the impact on voters with disabilities who may be more likely to use an expired ID. But we also have concerns about the legality of this requirement. This is because millions of Texans move within Texas every year. For example, and bear with me, I have some numbers. U.S. Census data shows that in 2023 alone, approximately 11.1% of Texans, that's 3,356,000 people, moved from one address to another within the state. Approximately 2,128,000 of those moves were within the same county. Given that Texas has an 81% voting age population registration rate, that equates to millions of voters moving within Texas every single year. This law would disenfranchise every one of those voters from voting in person if they failed to update their driver's license or handgun license every single time that they moved, an unreasonable burden. This would likely unconstitutionally burden the right to vote and violate a whole host of federal civil rights statutes, including the materiality provision of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which the Fifth Circuit has said prohibits denying the right to vote based on an error that does not meaningfully advance a substantial state interest relating to determining voter qualifications. Even assuming that the purpose of this bill is to protect so-called voter integrity, it is difficult to see how it would meaningfully advance that interest given its under-inclusiveness in discriminating between various forms of identification, applying to drivers and handgun licenses, but not other IDs. Moreover, overwhelmingly, the majority of the time this bill would apply, if not the only time it would apply, would be to the pedestrian scenario in which a voter has simply moved and not updated the address on their driver's license or handgun license. But that doesn't mean that they're somehow unqualified to vote or not who they say they are. In fact, Texas law already accounts for this common scenario by allowing voters who move outside the county to cast limited ballots and voters who move within the county to vote after filling out a statement of residence to update the voter rolls with their current address. I'll also point out, along with my colleague, Ms. French, that that the reasonable impediment declaration potential safeguard that the author mentioned is in jeopardy with another bill that the author is proposing today. This bill rolls back the clock by eliminating these common sense provisions that protect the right to vote. So we ask you not to report this harmful measure. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, very much. Chair calls David Sanchez, representing the Texas Civil Rights Project. Welcome, sir. I show you registered as David Sanchez. You're representing the Texas Civil Rights Project, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you. This is actually my first time testifying in the Texas Capitol, so thank you. So, Chair Shaheen, Vice Chair Busey, and the House Committee members, thank you. My name is David Sanchez. I'm representing Texas Civil Rights Project. I'm here to testify against House Bill 2739. This bill disproportionately disenfranchises young, low-income, and people of color. According to the census data, average American moves about 12 times in their lifetime. The majority of these moves happen when they are young adults. I have personally registered voters in this state since 2010. I've led some of the largest voter registration drives in the country through some of my previous roles. I've basically registered voters on college campuses across the country. We register students on and near college campuses. These students need to update their voter registration every single year. College students, they move every single year when they're in a dorm or apartment. And so they need to re-register every single year to make sure that they are compliant, to make sure that they can be able to vote. According to census data, 28-year-olds move approximately 6 times in their lives. So the majority of those moves happen as they're young adults. This bill would put an undue burden on young people that need to update their voter registration and their IDs on a yearly basis. We've already heard about the process and how long it takes to update their identification. This legislation would likely disenfranchise millions of Texans. The same census data shows that 13% of Hispanics and 14% of African American voters move on on a yearly basis. I don't think I need to remind this committee that Texas has the largest black voters in the country and the second most Latino voters in the country. This bill is very dangerous to democracy. It is a bill that it comes straight from the pages of the Jim Crow disenfranchisement playbook, and I urge this committee not to move this measure forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Good job, Mr. Sanchez. You're always welcome back to the Capitol. I would like to call as a resource witness Christina Atkins with the Secretary of State's office. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Christina Atkins. You are with the Secretary of State's office, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Vice Chair BC.
I've almost lost my voice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few things. One, we heard about the IDs, and some of these IDs wouldn't be able to be compliant. Can you walk us through that? Are you aware?
Yes, I think what the previous witnesses have been referencing is the fact that the requirement to add an address or to verify that, to do that address verification is only limited to 2 different types of IDs on the list of acceptable IDs. The other IDs that are listed on here, military identification card, citizenship certificate, passport, none of those contain an address on there, and so the law, it appears through this bill, has not been amended to include an address verification requirement for those IDs.
Okay. Can you talk through how this bill, if it was to be in effect, would impact current registration systems, poll books, or even our poll worker training?
So for that, with respect to that issue, I think a previous witness mentioned that back in 2011, when SB 11, the original bill for voter ID, was passed, it went into effect in 2013 because of some litigation. And then as a result of some of the subsequent, the settlements regarding that case, there was a lot of training that went into teaching people about voter ID. And one of the points that has been reiterated over the years is the fact that the address on your ID does not have to match the address that's in the list of registered voters. And that's because voter identification is to establish a person's identity. It doesn't necessarily serve as an additional validation of somebody's eligibility to vote.
Is that under state law, federal law, both?
Well, our voter ID law is a state law, so this is how the state law was put together.
And it's just to confirm that you are who you say you are?
Yes, sir. I think that was the original intent of the voter ID litigation from 2011.
Can you talk about college kids and how this would have an impact with maybe having a driver's license at their childhood home, their parents' home, and then going to, I don't know, Texas Tech and being from Austin, and how would this law impact them and their protections under federal law and how it comes into play here?
That's a great question. So right now, I think the bill as written doesn't make any carve-outs or create any carve-outs for individuals in that situation. If a student is using their driver's license to vote, that that address verification requirement would apply to that student. There is actually some federal law that pertains to this, and there's also a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. The case kind of on college student voting. It was actually a case out of Waller County involving Prairie View A&M students, and that Supreme Court case that's based on federal statutes provides that students actually get to choose where they register to vote at, that they are not required to only vote at their home location or their primary residence, that while they're in college they have the ability to choose to register and vote at that location. And so I think there could be some potential challenges based on that previous case law. I think that it sounded to me, and I'm not sure what a committee substitute would look like at this point, or what the plan is there. But the bill author did make reference to the fact that it sounds like they were looking at some kind of carve out related to state and federal races, possibly, which may be reflective of some of the things that we have in federal law and some of the requirements in state law that provide that if you have moved, but you can update your registration at the time that you're offering to vote, federal law says that state law can allow you to go ahead and vote at that location. So we have federal law that says that, and we have state law that's actually codified that too, that if you move from one location to another, but you still reside within your county, you are permitted to vote at that location and then complete what we call a statement of residence form to update your registration. And it sounded to me like that's what the bill author was perhaps trying to reflect in the bill, but I can verify that with her office.
But currently as written, this could potentially violate federal law when it comes to these students and their ID being at one place and going to campus at another place.
I think it's possible that we would receive some challenges.
Just one more thing on the seniors, we heard about seniors, and can you explain the requirements about seniors and an expired ID under current law?
Under current law, an individual that is over the age of 70 is allowed to use an expired ID. There are some other restrictions for expired IDs that limit you to only using it for 4 years, but if you're 70 or older, you have an unlimited time. There's no limit for the time for which your ID is expired.
So we heard the grandmother that's not allowed to drive anymore, example.
Mm-hmm.
She moves in with family, cross county line. Would they have to, if this bill went into effect, would that senior have to go get a new ID?
If that individual doesn't have another form of identification that they could use in lieu of that driver's license,
their address,
then they could use the reasonable impediment declaration process, or they would need to find a way to update their driver's license.
All right, well, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, for coming forward.
Of course.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 2739? Yes, sir. Are you registering or are you changing?
I'm changing my registration. I registered for the bill, not testifying. I want to testify.
Okay. Well, give us 1 second here. Okay, you can hit it. Sir, I show you registered as Ken Moore. You're here representing yourself, and you are here to testify for the bill.
That is correct.
Okay, welcome. You may proceed.
Okay. I would like to introduce you to a term that every election judge is very familiar with and any election official is familiar with. And the term is ballot style. And ballot style is where they take the address where you live, where your children go to school, where you pay taxes, all the entities you have to report to. And they create a ballot just for your address, or people in your neighborhood too. So that when you're voting for your state representative, you're voting for the guy that represents you and not somebody else. And you're voting for a school board, you're voting for somebody who's going to be over making decisions for schools that your child goes to and not someone else's schools. And if you vote to raise a tax on something well, it sounds like a good idea, just a 1% tax, and that'll help us fix this problem over here, you're voting to raise somebody else's taxes, not yours. And that is why it is so important that your registration be at your address. This bill goes a long way to make sure that happens. And I talk about disenfranchisement. Is it not disenfranchisement to have somebody else come into your district and vote for things that they have no stake in, that you have to live under? I would say that that strikes at the very heart of the democratic process. The reason we have elections is so that we vote for people and vote for items that affect us and not somebody else. And so I ask you to please move this bill forward.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir, for coming forward. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 2739? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Isaac to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I want to remind you of some facts that this bill would allow individuals whose address do not match to vote in a state and federal election. I also want to bring up the fact that senior citizens could get a free election identification certificate. I wanted to address Vice Chair Busey's concern about college students. Again, they could vote in the state and federal elections, or they could vote like my son does. He votes by mail-in ballot, or sometimes he drives to Hays County to vote. But he votes where his home is. I also want to remind everyone that if their addresses don't match, they can fill out a declaration of reasonable impediment. I also want to remind everyone that Texas law already requires that residents update their address within 30 days of moving. So again, this is just a safeguard to ensure that local elections reflect the voices of local residents, those who pay local taxes, attend local schools, and rely on local services. House Bill 2739 draws a clear, fair boundary that protects the principles of local control without preventing participation in state and national elections. If there are no further questions, I ask for a favorable consideration, and I close.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair Busey.
Yeah, just clarification. Back to the college kid. If they're from, let's say they live here in Austin, they're going for 4 years out to Lubbock, and they've got a job out there, and they're a student out there, and they're engaged in their community, and they're engaged in what's going on locally. Under this bill, though, if they still have their license back home, they wouldn't be able to vote for the city council races, even if they're like paying and working and engaged in that local city?
Right. Well, I would think that if they are there 4 years and they're that involved, that they should probably change their driver's license address. And also, like many have mentioned, they could bring another form of ID if they have it, a passport.
If it proves their location?
No, I'm just saying they actually could just bring a passport and vote there, because you don't have, like several witnesses have mentioned, not all IDs have an address on them.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like, what if they're like a poor working college kid that's never left the country? Maybe they're not going to have that ID. I'm just worried that we're going to cut them out if they're civically engaged and want to be, because of economic reasons, from being able to participate. And I was involved. I remember I went to school in Sherman, Texas, and I got involved in city council races and elections, even though I was, from Dallas and Austin, my parents, and I'm trying to think where my driver's license is. I guess it would have been Dallas. So I'm just trying to understand like why we wouldn't want those kids to get civically engaged on all levels and then be able to vote at all levels. And so I just want to make sure, and I know you're working on committee sub, I just want to make sure we're not cutting that out, because I hear the argument that, we want to make sure people vote where they are, the last taxing argument, but these college kids are highly, some kids go and they get highly invested in their local community. So I just want to make sure we're allowing them to not have their voice stunted when it comes to local elections and things like that as well.
No, I hear you and I agree, because my boys are poor because I'm not rich and we're trying to get them through college. So the poor college student could get an election identification certificate that is free, and they can also fill out a reasonable impediment declaration, and they can also just vote, in the state or federal elections. My district is very close to Travis County, and I have worked many. I don't say work them. I'm always on the outside. I'm helping candidates. I'm a candidate, and I talk with a lot of voters. And I have talked with a lot, over and over and over, voters that say, "Oh, I moved to Travis County from Hayes County, but I'm here voting because this is where I'm still registered to vote."
Sure.
And I don't like people from Travis County living in Travis County driving to Hayes County to vote.
I understand. I understand that problem, and I understand that we want to make sure, but I also think we just have to think through the unintended consequences of
I hear you.
cutting out that local. So, I'm happy to talk to you more about your ideas on the committee side.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Any other questions? If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill is left pending. Chair lays out HB 4475 and recognizes Representative Isaac to explain the bill. The chair offers a committee substitute.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Yes, I do have a sub. Under current Texas law, a person without a photo ID can vote by signing a reasonable impediment declaration, or RID, and present one of several alternate forms of identification. This option was created to ensure that no eligible voter is disenfranchised due to temporary or reasonable barriers to obtain a photo ID. However, this process has created a loophole. As the law stands, a person may sign this declaration multiple times without any meaningful limits or follow-up. There is currently no system in place to track how often a voter uses this declaration, and no accountability mechanism to ensure that voters eventually comply with ID laws. House Bill 4475 addresses this vulnerability without removing the ability of Texas to vote due to legitimate hardships. If a voter does not possess and cannot reasonably attain one of the acceptable forms of photo ID, they may present one of the following supporting forms of identification to execute a RID: a current utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, a paycheck, and any other government document that shows the voter's name and address, voter registration certificate, and birth certificate. When presenting a supporting form of ID, the voter must complete a RID indicating the reasons they cannot obtain an acceptable form of photo ID. Acceptable reasons include lack of transportation, disability or illness, lack of birth certificate or other documents needed to obtain an acceptable form of photo ID, work schedule, family responsibilities, lost or stolen identification, acceptable form of photo ID applied for but not received. By completing the reasonable impediment declaration and presenting a supporting form of identification, the voter is permitted to cast a regular ballot. The sub allows voters to use a RID once and a second time only in a runoff election. This prevents someone from using a RID in back-to-back general elections years apart without ever complying. For example, with this limit, a voter could use a RID in the 2020, without this limit, a voter could use a RID in the 2026 general, and again in the 2028 general, and then delay compliance until 2030. By restricting a second use to a runoff, the bill encourages timely compliance while still supporting voters with legitimate short-term barriers. This bill requires the registrar to note in the voter's file each time a declaration is used. This ensures election officials can track usage over time and identify potential abuse of the process. The Secretary of State must approve the format of these notations to ensure consistency across counties. After a voter uses a declaration, the county must send the voter written information on acceptable photo IDs. They must send the voter a written information on acceptable photo IDs and how to obtain one. This helps voters to take steps to full compliance. At the polling place, if a voter uses a RID because they lack acceptable ID, the election officer will offer the voter the opportunity to provide their mailing address if it's already on file or is different from what appears in the voter registration record. This mailing address will be used by the county to send the voter the information required, which includes a list of acceptable forms of photo identification, an explanation of how to obtain an acceptable form of photo ID under Texas law, such as locations, documents needed, and steps to apply. This ensures that the voter receives targeted, constructive information about how to become fully compliant with voter ID requirements before the next election. This reinforces voter education and access by helping individuals who struggle to present proper ID understand exactly what they need to do to comply. It supports election integrity by reducing repeat use of the DRI. It provides a direct communication channel between election offices and voters who may otherwise fall through the cracks. House Bill 4475 is about balance. It keeps the reasonable impediment process in place for those who truly need it, but prevents it from being exploited by those who might seek to avoid voter ID requirements altogether. This ensures that election officials have the tools to monitor and verify this process and that voters receive the support they need to comply with the law. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I respectfully reserve the right to close.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? We will reserve your right to close, and we'll go to public testimony. Chair calls Ed Johnson with Harris County Ballot Security and Self. Hello, sir. I show you registered as Ed Johnson. You are representing Harris County Ballot Security and yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Another great bill. I will tell you, it's all of them. In Harris County, we ran some statistics on this, and a large percentage of the people voting RIDs over the years are continual users. They have continually come and claim they don't have any photo ID and have been using this document over and over again. It's not compliant with state law. State law says you're supposed to, get your ID within 30 days of moving here. So they should have an ID by the time they get to the next election if they're following state law, if they didn't have one the first time. So there's this large body out here of people using this that for some reason either don't want to show their ID or do not have one for some reason. And this would hopefully put it into this where make them follow the state law and get their ID and show it when they come vote.
Yes, sir. Members, any question? Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
very much. Chair calls Kathy Hagler, representing herself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Kathy Hagler. You're representing yourself, and you're here to testify for the bill.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Welcome. You may proceed.
Thank you. This is a great bill. I was pretty shocked at one of our other committee hearings where someone testified that on a different day, that almost 50% of their in-person voters voted with a reasonable impediment declaration, or RID, in last November's election. And that just makes no sense to me, because it's usually pretty rare that someone comes in to vote, but they don't have a driver's license, election identification card, an ID card, a license to carry, a passport, a birth certificate, or a military ID, but it does happen. So that's what this is there for. So when you're not able to get one of those forms of ID, you can still vote the RID when you show your proper identification and documentation. I do think that there should be a finite number of the number of times that a RID can be used, and it should be a very small number, and I think Representative Isaac found the right formula. I was going to read you the list of all the reasonable impediments that the voter can claim, but she's already covered those things like family responsibilities, lost or stolen ID, so I'll skip the rest of that. I know that it takes time and money to get some of those IDs, so that's why it is absolutely free to get that election identification certificate if you are not able to get any of the other IDs. The RIDs are there for people who have impediments that kept them from getting an ID, but after the election, they will have plenty of time and opportunity to get an acceptable ID. And I would say it's kind of like if you've ever had to vote provisional. Once you've done that, you're not going to want to do it again. So somebody who's had to go through that RID process, filling out all those forms and providing the documentation, most of those people would want to go ahead and get one of those 7 acceptable forms of photo ID before they have to do that again. Please support 4475. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much for being here. Chair calls Dr. Susanna Carranza, representing yourself. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Dr. Susanna Carranza. You are representing yourself, and you are here to testify against the bill.
That is correct.
Okay, welcome.
And there's a common phrase, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. This is what this all feels like. This bill will essentially put a limit of 2 reasonable impediment declarations in the lifetime of a voter. And then one of the valid reasons for reasonable impediment declaration is if you lost your ID. If you met my husband, you would know that he's lost his wallet many, many times in his lifetime. And we were just lucky that because we're naturalized citizens, we have our passport, so he wouldn't be disenfranchised. But a lot of people, especially young folks, might not have a passport yet. So in Texas, we have so many elections that if a person used a RID in the March primaries and then again in the May elections, they use up their lifetime allotment for using a RID. So if for whatever reason ever in their lifetime they happen to lose an ID close to an election, they lost their right to vote. How is that right? And I find really ironic that this bill was mentioned by the author in another bill as they say, well, if your ID doesn't match, you can use a RID, and now you have this 2 strikes and you're out limitation. It's particularly sad that a person who represents a region that is adjacent to Texas State, meaning it probably houses a lot of college students, is proposing a bill that likely disproportionately disenfranchise college students. I asked before, and I will ask again. Are the authors of these bills afraid of their voters? Because these laws that many of you are passing seem to really discourage participation, especially of folks that have a harder time to vote. Let Texans vote. Please oppose this bill.
Thank you,
Any
ma'am.
questions?
Members, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Chair calls Jennifer Doinoff with the Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself. I show you registered as Jennifer Doinoff. You are representing Texas Association of County Election Officials and yourself, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. And once again, I did speak with Representative Isaac's office about our concerns about this bill. Again, we do have concerns that this bill would unfairly or unintended consequences would be to the elderly population, once again, that is over 70 and doesn't, they're using a expired driver's license, they don't drive, it's not easy for them to get out, and they may not even know this law has changed. So we just want to make that verbal announcement of our concern of that. Also, currently with the bill, our poll book workflow, we would have difficulty with that. That would mean that a lot of poll book softwares and interaction between the team system would have to change for this bill to work. And I passed out this document to you because, I mean, I don't know who said that they did 50% of RIDs. I don't remember hearing that in testimony. Maybe they did, but it's really a very, very small occurrence. And if you look at the chart, this chart is from the presidential election from Denton County. And I'm not sure that everybody keeps this good of a chart. But if you look at the chart, the acceptable ID was applied for, but not received by a majority, an overwhelming majority of the voters that used a RID. And I think that's probably something good to know, because I think the problem is more with getting an ID than it is with anything else. And then secondly, on the list B, overwhelmingly, the majority of people provided either a government check or a voter registration certificate. So the rest is pretty minimal if you look at it. And I think this information is something, and I shared this with Representative Isaac. I think we should have this data statewide. I think we should track this, which is something that she's looking to do in the bill. And then I think we should come back and let you know how big the problem is next session. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank
Chair
you.
calls Mary Ibarra with the ACLU of Texas. Hello, ma'am. I show you registered as Mary Ibarra. You're with the ACLU of Texas, and you're here to testify against the bill?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you may proceed.
Hi, members. Thanks for staying late. My name is Mary Ibarra. I'm a voting rights strategist with the ACLU of Texas, and I'm here to ask you to oppose HB 4475. This bill states that a voter may only use a reasonable impediment declaration, and with the committee sub once per election, including that runoff aspect. After VCV Abbott, the legislature agreed to implement this legislature agreed to implement the Declaration of Reasonable Impediment as a part of a court-ordered remedy to address findings that voter ID was implemented with a discriminatory purpose in violation of federal law. This form was necessary to address court findings that Hispanic registered voters and Black registered voters were respectively 195% and 305% more likely than their Anglo peers to lack voter ID. To be clear, the ability to submit a reasonable impediment declaration was a critical component of resolving that lawsuit. Only allowing people to submit a single reasonable impediment declaration substantially disrupts a resolution that will create a serious problem for Texas voters and is contrary to the intent of reasonable impediment declaration. There is simply no reason to assume that reasonable impediments are a one-time thing. It's important to note that many people's obstacles to getting ID are not temporary. Financial burdens are likely to remain an impediment, and as are disabilities that keep a voter from being able to obtain a voter ID. We talk about Harris County a lot in this committee. I've had some time today, and I looked it up. A Houston or Harris County voter could have experienced 9 elections from November 2023 to November 2024. That's the mayoral race, a primary, a special election to replace a senator who is now the mayor, a central appraisement district board, and the general election. That means if somebody hasn't been able to attain an ID in that year, they wouldn't be able to vote at all. Although there is no fiscal note on this bill, I will add that the last time similar laws were passed, the state needed to pay out $6.8 million in legal fees, a bill that Texas taxpayers should not be on the hook for if this were to happen again. Again, to address long DPS wait times, I know an election identification certificate has come up multiple times. Per the DPS website, they state if you've never had a Texas ID, please schedule an appointment. If you have a driver's license or ID card that is expired, you still need to schedule an appointment. So the barriers to getting one of these cards through DPS is still in place for voters who have a reasonable impediment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, very much for your testimony. Chair calls Sophia Murto, representing herself. I show you registered as Sophia Murto. You are representing yourself, and you're here to testify against the bill.
I am.
All right, you may proceed.
This bill would only allow a voter to use a reasonable impediment declaration, the form that you use when you don't have an ID to bring to the polls, twice. Can someone clarify if this means twice in their county of registration, twice in their lifetimes in Texas, or twice in their lifetime in any election in any state? Secondly, everyone has this option to fill out this form and provide an alternate ID in the moment of either their voter registration documents, out-of-state IDs, in order to access their constitutional right to vote. So again, if you're using a RID, you're also proving your identity and showing some sort of ID that they can match in the moment. Someone has claimed that it's free to get an EID, and it may be free to receive it, but it does cost your time and transportation, both of which have an economic cost for the eligible citizen. People who use this option include young professionals, recent transplants, college students, and people who cannot afford ID or having trouble accessing their ID. It can take weeks to get an appointment to get a new driver's license if yours gets lost or stolen. And then are you only allowed to lose your license twice in your lifetime? There are many circumstances in which a citizen would use this option that are entirely outside of a citizen's control. This will disproportionately affect elderly citizens, rural citizens, Black and brown citizens, and our neighbors below the poverty line. Really, this is a shocking proposition. I can imagine no reasonable need in Texas for a law that would limit the ability of eligible voters to cast their vote. Again, I would like to direct you to the United States Constitution, the 24th Amendment, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, and Article 6 of the Texas Constitution, which states in Section 4, in all elections by the people, the vote shall be by ballot, and the legislature shall provide for the numbering of tickets and make other such regulations as may be necessary to detect and punish fraud, and preserve the purity of the ballot box, and the legislature shall provide by law for the registration of all voters. I do not want my tax money to be used to defend an unconstitutional bill. Someone just quoted a very high amount of our tax money that already went to unconstitutional bills. We do not want this to keep happening. I genuinely do not understand the moral defensibility of making it harder for eligible citizens to cast their constitutional vote. I mean, the Constitution is the law of the land, right? It's the thing that we compare all laws to, and I wish that there was like a checkpoint for bills before they even get to a committee for someone to compare it to the Constitution, because this is blatantly unconstitutional, and I'm very concerned that the body will pass such an unconstitutional bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Chair calls Emily French with Common Cause, Texas. I show you registered as Emily French. You're with Common Cause, Texas, and you're here to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay, welcome back.
out of respect for, you all look well rested, but I know you're not actually after the last couple of days. So I'll go quick. Many of the points I was going to make have already been made. I do believe that this bill violates the VCV Abbott decision by the Fifth Circuit. That's our voter ID law. Reasonable impediments are the result of that decision. The Fifth Circuit created reasonable impediments with the folks who are party to that lawsuit. I'm disturbed to hear folks say that you can use a reasonable impediment until you come into compliance with the law, because a reasonable impediment is compliance with the law. The law is written by the Fifth Circuit, says you can use a reasonable impediment declaration. Several of these conditions on the list of reasonable impediments do not go away. Disability, family responsibilities, lack of transportation, work schedule, those are all reasonable impediments, and they will not go away after one use of a reasonable impediment. An election ID certificate, as folks have pointed out, doesn't cost money, but it does cost a day's wages to go down to the DPS. It does still take 2 to 6 months to get a DPS appointment, and there are still 70 counties without a DPS office at all. I am against this bill, and I bet I'm as ready to go as y'all are.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Chair calls Veronica Worms with the Texas Civil Rights Project. I show you registered as Veronica Worms. You're with the Texas Civil Rights Project, and you would like to testify against the bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, you may proceed.
All right. Well, we oppose this bill because it will disenfranchise people who have a reasonable impediment, obviously. Having a one-time limit on using the reasonable impediment declaration to vote directly undermines principles of inclusive democracy and will disenfranchise thousands of Texas voters who struggle to get a state-approved ID. There are only 7 reasons that a voter can claim to access their right to vote without the required ID, and none of them are the voter's fault. They are impediments that could happen to anyone, and that's the point. As an example, what about a person who applied for an ID and our chronically backlogged DPS system failed to send it to them before an election? If that voter wanted to participate in the democratic process again after having their ID stolen, would be out of luck. Further, many of those impediments don't go away. For instance, if a voter's chronic illness or disability prevents them from getting a voter ID, that impediment isn't going to magically disappear after one election. Are we going to take away the only way that they have to comply with the voter ID law? We oppose limiting this tool that helps Texans participate in the democratic process despite circumstances in their way. I would also point out that the committee substitutes provisional ballot provision is frankly cruel and misleading. Requiring election workers to reject a voter's provisional ballot after they've used a reasonable impediment declaration gives the voter false hope that their ballot will be counted, even though they cannot cure it without the very photo ID that they can't access. Moreover, Texas voter ID laws are only legal today because of the reasonable impediment declaration process. I've already talked about this, and some of my colleagues have too, so I won't repeat it. But basically, Texas codified the reasonable impediment declaration to make the voter ID laws constitutional. Adding a one-time cap to this tool would undermine that very system. Overall, this is going to disenfranchise a lot of people for no benefit, and we're against this bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you, ma'am, for your testimonies today. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on for or against House Bill 4475 and its committee substitute? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Isaac to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Because someone can use a current utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, and a paycheck, I heard from many constituents that were concerned. This bill is about balance. It keeps the reasonable impediment process in place for those who truly need it, but it prevents it from being exploited by those who might seek to avoid voter ID requirements altogether. It ensures that election officials have the tools to monitor and verify this process, and that voters receive the support they need to comply with the law. If there are no further questions, I ask for your favorable consideration, and I close.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill is left pending. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Is there any further business for the committee to address? If not, the chair moves to adjourn. Is there objection? Hearing none, the House Committee on Elections stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.